An entitled pastor lies straight to my face, claiming that he has every right to take over a reserved spot at our park, claiming that he got permission from the people who actually reserved this spot by saying that they're good friends despite the fact that they've never met before, forcing me to prove this guy wrong and humiliate him in a way that he truly will never forget. Here's how it all went down. Okay, so I'm a ranger at a park that's very popular for outdoor picnicking and gatherings. Several of our picnic shelters are available for reservations, while others are always first come, first serve. Now, of course, until the group who paid for the reservation shows up, part of my job is to make sure that no one else tries to claim the shelter as their own. Well, one busy Saturday morning, I had to intervene when some random people started to gather at Shelter 2, which was reserved for someone who we will call Susie Smith. I directed them to another available area before they got too settled in. I did a lap of the park, assisted with some other camping logistics, and passed by Shelter 2 again. And this time, a new group was setting up now, which was a huge affair. We're talking several dozen people, multiple coolers, food warmer trays, several big bags of charcoal, outdoor games, the works. I learned that they were also not part of Susie Smith's party and tried to redirect them to another area. But the gentleman in charge wanted to argue. He was the pastor of this church group and they needed a large space like this one. I then explained the reservation system and I pointed out the sign in case he had missed it. And then he decided to lie to me. And I hate lying. The man claimed he had spoken to Susie Smith and her party and that she was done with the shelter for the day. Susie herself had given his church the go-ahead to take over the shelter. I explained that this seemed unlikely as we had not yet heard from Miss Smith. If anything, the people he spoke to were likely the other group who had also been asked to leave shelter number 2, as it wasn't their reservation. Well, he denied it and doubled down that he had permission to use the shelter. Now that he knew Susie's name, he kept throwing it around like they were old pals. And with that, an idea formed. One that I knew would shut this guy down once and for all. I looked at him, I said, "Oh, all right, sir. I'm not going to argue with the pastor or deprive a church group of the best picnic spot in the park. I'm sure that you're telling me the truth. So you guys go ahead and set up and enjoy." And with that, he smiled. He had won. I then said, "But if Susie Smith and her party show up and your group is in the way, that's going to be a problem. It'll take forever for you to clear out and let them use the space they've paid for. So at that point, we would have to ask your group to pack up and leave the park for the day. If you're not confident that this space is truly yours, you might want to find somewhere else to barbecue." He then got mad and argued that I wasn't being fair. There was no reason to kick out his whole group. But I said to him, "Oh, I agree, sir. I'm sure that a good Christian pastor of a church wouldn't lie to me or try to take what someone else has paid for. And the only reason I'd kick you out would be if you lied to me. So you guys go ahead and enjoy. Unless, there's a reason you shouldn't." Well, with that, I hopped in my cart and I drove away. A few minutes later, I saw that Shelter 2 was empty and his group had crowded around the last available picnic table in the furthest corner of the park. Soon after, Miss Smith called to reschedule her reservation, as her group would be unable to make it out that day. I then found the family who had first tried to set up at the shelter, and I let them know that it had just become available. And these were lovely people to deal with, especially in comparison to this crooked pastor. Oh man, good for you for putting this guy in his place. This really is so funny to me. Here you have a pastor of a Christian church trying to be like, "Oh yeah, we're allowed to be here. Susie allowed us to do it specifically. It's no big deal." But it's like, dude, this guy is literally lying through his teeth. Like, what a scumbag. You would think someone who's a leader of a church would be a better example, let alone try and uphold what they actually believe. Like, that is some scumbag behavior that absolutely deserves to get shut down. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. An entitled Karen calls the cops on me all because I wouldn't give up my seat at Starbucks, putting me in one of the weirdest situations I've probably ever been in my life. Here's what happened. Okay, so I was once fixing a friend's phone at Starbucks. We both had drinks and hers was still there. She then ran out to grab something I needed to work on the phone. Well, this entitled little jerk marches over and insists that they must be allowed to sit there, even though half a phone is spread out between 2 seats on the bench. I relayed to them that the seat is in use and in any case, there is just no space available. They tried to say, "Well, there's obviously no one here," with a big stupid voice of sarcasm, and then proceeded to sit anyways, and then move their arms like they were about to try and sweep these tiny little phone screws off the edge. I moved my arm to block them while still holding this mini screwdriver in my hand. We argued back and forth for a hot minute, and it's clear they're not giving up, but I'm not done and I'm not moving either. Well, this idiot then picks up their phone and goes, "I'm calling the police if you don't stop." But I just laugh and say, "Fine, go right ahead." Well, much to my surprise, that's exactly what they did. Right as I'm sitting there staring at me, they get this big grin on their face, and then she says over the phone that I said I was gonna stab her with a screwdriver. I then let out the biggest incredulous laugh and I say, "That's complete BS. You're trying to steal my friend's seat," and then try to push a bunch of her stuff onto the floor. So they get up and go outside and wait for the cops to show up, while I just finish repairing the phone. Considering that I I was nearly done anyways, it really didn't take long. And just as we wrapped up, the cops showed up. We started to leave and I just kind of paused and I thought to myself, no, you know what? I'm not doing this. And I ended up walking over to the cops. I say to them, I'm the one this little psycho's talking about. Here's the tools I was working with and this is the phone I was just repairing when they tried to shove the stuff on the ground. Do you need me to stick around? One of the cops just gives me an eye rolling looking like, oh no, we know this one, and goes, no, you're all good. And so we just left. Now, what's crazy is that a few years later, I saw a post on the housing group in the area talking about exactly this kind of behavior, and much worse, like changing locks on roommates, throwing stuff out, etc. And they were warning people not to rent to this person. And it's funny because the picture they posted was someone who looked exactly like them. And while I'm not sure this is necessarily the same person, I honestly would not be surprised if it was, because this behavior seems incredibly familiar. Dude, this lady was crazy. Like, seriously, it is just a spot at Starbucks, dude. Like, why do you gotta act like a complete psychopath? Not only were they gonna like destroy your property and throw it all over the place, but they also made a fake phone call to the cops. Like, dude, you're a loser. Why would you do that? Just find somewhere else to sit. So yeah, I would not be surprised either if this is the same person that you dealt with, because it truly sounds like something they would absolutely do. Am I the jerk for telling my friend that I can't stand her daughter after I've literally witnessed her daughter take advantage of my friend in ways that are completely unacceptable, leading to my friend now giving me the silent treatment and making me wonder if I might have crossed the line? Here's what's going on. So I don't have any children of my own, but one of my girlfriends had a son of her own and adopted her niece at birth 17 years ago, even as a young mom. My friend did a great job raising her children, and at some points worked 3 jobs just to ensure her children got everything they could ask for. I have always applauded her for spoiling her kids and providing a luxury of life for them all on her own. Now, here's where things get a little bit sour. Her adopted daughter fell off the handles and stole her car and purse, which she didn't have a license to drive. She didn't call the police on her, and which I really get it. You don't want to get your child arrested. Her daughter then ended up leaving to live with her biological mom, who is my friend's sister. While in her care, she had no rules. She never went to school, and then she ended up pregnant. And we all gathered around to help out in any way that we could for this baby. My friend even threw a massive baby shower, and we all put in a lot of effort to make it fun. Well, my friend's daughter showed up, but spent most of the party outside passing joints around. And then when she was back at the party, she didn't appreciate all the people who had literally helped put on the baby shower, but instead made a big speech thanking her mom, her biological mom, while referring to my friend, the one who raised her, as her first name. It was terrible to see my friend treated awfully, but my friend still continued to provide everything to her daughter and bought 2 of everything so the baby would have everything at my friend's house and at the baby's home. The baby arrived and it was all sugar sweet. My friend was by her daughter's side to help with the baby and was back to being referred to as mom by her daughter. And it was nice like this for maybe a month. When the baby was a month old, my friend's daughter was already trying to pawn off the baby to go back to partying and getting in trouble. Now, how do I know this? Well, she moved into my mom's neighborhood and also was posting to her Snapchat, not realizing I wasn't blocked from seeing it. I mentioned it to my friend and she was just living in denial. It got to the point where the daughter was airing out her baby daddy drama by posting it on the internet and was asking for substances, parties, and even posted about her friends calling in fake reports to the police, to both the school and the mall, and just laughing about it. And at this point, I decided to remove her from my social media. Now, here's where I might be the jerk. My friend wanted to throw her daughter a big party to celebrate her 18th birthday, talking about themes and gifts and wanting to make it very elaborate. I thought about what I wanted to say, and I settled on advising that I wasn't going to come because I couldn't stomach watching her daughter disrespect her, and that I really just can't stand being around her after how she's been acting. I wished her a great party and hoped her daughter appreciated her throwing her a party in the first place. Well, my friend hasn't spoken to me now in 2 months, which makes me think that I might be the jerk here. So truly, did I mess up in some kind of way? Because right now I don't know what to do. No, honestly, I think you absolutely said what needed to be said, and any good friend who's worth their weight in gold would have been like, yeah, your daughter's not a good person. She's clearly taking advantage of your friend, and it's like, no matter how many times you try to spend money on her or like throw a party, I just don't think she's gonna care about you in the same way you care about her. So no, you're not the jerk for speaking up and saying the truth, because in my opinion, I think your friend absolutely needs to hear the truth. An entitled Karen tried to get my dog euthanized, all because her son was scared of him. She even took this a step farther by filing a complaint with animal control, claiming that my dog had bit her son, trying to get me in trouble in a way that was completely inappropriate and completely false, leading me to believe that this lady has some serious problems. Here's what happened. I'm a 29-year-old female and I have a golden retriever named Benny. He is calm, trained, certified as a therapy dog, and honestly more polite than most people. I walk him daily at the same time through our local neighborhood park. Well, one day, this entitled mom comes up to me with her maybe 8-year-old son trailing behind her. She starts to say to me, "Excuse me, can you not walk your dog around here anymore? My son is afraid of big dogs." I then say to her, "Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but this is a public park and he's leashed and under control. She looks at me and says, "That is not the point. He gets anxious when he sees your dog. Do you want to traumatize a child?" I then told her that I'd be happy to cross the path if we saw them again, but I wasn't going to stop walking my dog. Well, fast forward a week and I get a knock on my door from animal control. And apparently, this entitled Karen filed a complaint saying that my dog was aggressive and bit her son. Now, luckily, I had timestamped security cam footage of us coming and going that day, and I even had a neighbor's phone video of Benny playing fetch nowhere near them. Well, the complaint was dropped, but I still can't get over the fact that she tried to have my dog put down, all because her kid just didn't like dogs, which really makes me believe that this woman has some serious issues. Dude, what a psychopath. Who in their right mind would do that? Like, seriously, if you don't like dogs, then guess what? Don't go to a park that has dogs that walk around. Like, what's going on right now? This is so stupid. This is so easily solved, it's not even funny. She could go literally anywhere else in the world, but instead she tries to be like, "You need to change your behavior for me," and then try to be like, "Oh yeah, your dog bit my child. I'm gonna have it put down." It's like, dude, what's happening right now? On that note, I really hope there's some kind of like legal step you can go through, because she literally made a false report against you and your dog. And this is like a certified therapy dog, so there's gotta be something on your side when it comes to like filing a complaint against her. Like, she literally endangered your dog's life for nothing. Like, actually no reason at all. You've never talked to this lady, you've never interacted with her or her stupid son. So for her to come out of nowhere and be like, "You need to leave," like, that's just so dumb and obnoxious. So good for you for shutting that down, and thank God you had some footage, because otherwise this could have easily gone in a much different direction. Am I the jerk for yelling at my sisters, all because they wanted to come on a fishing trip that was meant to be for just me and my dad as a graduation present? Because right now, even though it's been a few months later, I'm still very bitter about this and I just don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. I'm an 18-year-old female and I have a stepsister and a sister. I've never really gotten along with my stepfamily, but that's not super important for this story. I had just graduated high school, and as a reward for graduating and getting into my chosen program, my dad had booked a fishing charter for me and him and a family friend to go out and fish for a day, hopefully catching something and then have a nice fish dinner. I was super excited for this and spent ages researching everything, all the way down to what lures I'm going to use on the lake. Then one night we went out for dinner, namely me, my sisters, my dad, and stepmom, and my sisters announced how excited they were to go on the fishing trip. Now, this would not have been a problem if that was the original plan. I've gone fishing with them before and it was fun, but I rarely get to spend one-on-one time with my dad, so this was supposed to be special. On top of that, my biological sister had already had her graduation present the year before, which was a month-long European vacation. And no, I'm not joking. I wasn't allowed to go on that, of course, because it was my sister's present and I would get one the next year. After I tried to explain that no, this was my present and it was my time to have a solo trip, my dad just said they were coming and that was the end of the story. I then got upset and I yelled at them in the restaurant that it wasn't fair, that she had her fancy vacation that cost tens of thousands of dollars, and I just wanted one day, a single $200 fishing trip. Then I ran off to go sulk and whatnot, only to then return about 15 minutes later, just to be screamed at for being ungrateful and cruel, and then being told I was no longer going on the fishing trip. Well, the next day, my sisters and stepmom went on the trip, and while my dad did end up taking me on a smaller one, it still felt bad. And I will be completely honest, I was a bit grouchy for the duration of it, but I really did try to have fun, and I did catch something in the end. Well, today, a few months later, my dad suggested that my sister go on another short European vacation, while also helping our stepsister move, and staying a bit longer because of course she wouldn't just stay in Italy for 2 days. Then he mentioned having another fishing trip for the two of us, and I just jokingly said, well, shouldn't we wait to have my sisters get back? To which I was promptly called ungrateful and rude again. So I just want to know, am I the jerk here, or is there something else going on that I honestly cannot control? Because right now I just don't know what to do. You are not the jerk. Let me just say that first and foremost. You didn't do anything wrong, and the fact that your dad is showing favoritism is unbelievably disgusting. Because that's exactly what's happening, by the way. He would rather go to Europe with his other daughters than deal with you at all, apparently. And you're not even asking a lot. You literally are just trying to be like, hey, let's go on a fishing trip. Let's spend some one-on-one time together. How is this such a problem? Like, that is super uncalled for and just super toxic in my opinion. And the fact that he doesn't see a problem with it is just so bizarre to me. So yeah, this is a really crappy situation, but it's definitely not your fault. Because the fault, in my opinion, falls squarely on your dad's shoulders. My entitled brother gave out my phone number when we were younger to some random girl who called me repeatedly over and over again. But now, all the way into our adulthood, even though it's several years later, I finally got my revenge by giving out his phone number to a bunch of construction workers who have been using it in a way that honestly he will never forget. Here's what happened. Many years ago, before I was married, my little brother gave my phone number to some random girl while on a high school trip from St. Louis to Kansas City. This girl called me repeatedly one night while I was having dinner with my then girlfriend, claiming she was my little Italian princess. says. Well, fast forward several years, and this jerk is now on his third marriage, presumably because he's a massive narcissist. Now he's got a kid, and our mom shared his social media post to celebrate the birth of her 6th grandchild and 2nd grandson. Well, he lit her up, claimed that she didn't have his permission to share it, and then went into a 3-screen long diatribe about how she, my sister, and myself are the reason that he's been in therapy for almost 10 years, which is amazing because I cut all contact with the guy 5 years ago and barely even wanted to associate with him for 10 years before that. But needless to say, I digress because now I finally got my revenge. I recently handed over his number to a friend that's in construction with the guidance to give it to all of his construction friends and send them pictures of their actual crap from their job site porta potties. I've also started carrying a permanent marker in my truck so that I can leave his number behind in any sketchy gas station, bathroom, or a porta potty that I can find with a simple note of saying, hey, text me because I want to talk to you. And sure, while it is petty, it definitely still feels really good to get back at this guy because he was a nightmare growing up. Oh man, yeah, that's definitely a good way to get some very petty revenge. You don't even talk to this guy anymore and you're giving out his number to people and being like, oh yeah, send gross pictures to him, flood him, absolutely overwhelm his phone with this stuff. That's really funny in my opinion. I think that's hilarious. And honestly, that does seem like a good way to get revenge, especially with the way he treated you growing up. An entitled jerk refuses to allow me to do my job, telling that I can't tell him how to do his job, despite the fact that it was literally my job to inspect his plant that he worked at, resulting in his plant getting shut down, all because he refused to listen to me. Here's what happened. Okay, so this happened decades ago for a food production company where I was a quality control manager. I regularly checked the quality of the food that we produced, as well as the food production lines for 4 plants in the area. One plant I inspected was operating within tolerance and received a generally good report, but I had to note one potential hazard. The parking lot was in terrible condition, and the dust that the employees' vehicles kicked up as they entered and left work could enter the plant and contaminate the food production line. I gave a copy of my report to the plant operations supervisor and suggested we get it taken care of before the USDA inspector noticed it. Well, his response was to say, "You were here to inspect food production, not the parking lot." But I said that I'm here to ensure the quality of the food product that leaves this plant. But he responds by saying, "That's BS." And then he said the words that every malicious complier thrives on. "Don't tell me how to run my plant." Well, fast forward 6 weeks later, and the USDA inspector shuts down the plant, citing the quality of the parking lot and the heightened risk of dust entering the food production line. And it's like, oh man, who knew that was going to happen? But even then, there was a workaround that could have easily kept the plant open, only the plant operations had demanded that I don't tell them how to run their plant. But even so, I had to ask. The following month, after the lot had been repaved and the inspector had finally approved the plant to be reopened, I said, well, why didn't you just close down the parking lot and have the employee park on the street? You could literally schedule the repave on a weekend and the plant could have stayed open in operation. Now, this guy didn't lose his job. In fact, he just retired from that company. So I guess it was a lesson learned, but you can bet he definitely did not talk to me ever again after that. Wow, imagine being so stubborn and idiotic that you wouldn't do exactly what it takes to, like, I don't know, make sure your plant is going to stay open and have like things going on the way it's supposed to go. And you can bet this guy was given two options. He can either be fired or he can retire early. And I'm positive that guy decided to retire early because he has no other prospects if he gets fired. So good for you for doing your job, and honestly, this guy got exactly what he deserved. Because if he had just listened, all of this could have been avoided very easily. Am I overreacting for wanting to quit my job after I was falsely accused of stealing something at work? Because right now I am completely heartbroken, and at this point I don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, to start things out, I work as a stalker. I've never done anything wrong at work, and I work very hard and go above and beyond what I need to do. But yesterday I was accused by a boss saying that I stole and drank one of their beers. But this is not true, and I'm very upset about it. I told them that they're wrong and I could see the footage, and they said there's no camera there, but they said that they could see me do it. Now, I bring my own water bottle to work, and that's all I've ever drank. I told them that they're wrong and how upset I feel about the accusation, because I work really hard for them. At the end of the night, they apologized and said they feel stupid for accusing me, and know that I'm a good worker and probably the best worker they've ever had, and they don't want to lose me. But I still feel hurt and let down. Like, why am I working my butt off so hard and going above and beyond when this could happen so easily? I mean, what should I do here? It's really stressing on me, and I feel undervalued and underappreciated, and I really just want to quit at this point, but I'm honestly not sure if that's the right move. What should I do? Okay, dude, the second anybody falsely accuses me of anything is the second I'm gonna put my notice in or just straight up quit and go somewhere else. Seriously, this is them probably testing the waters to see if they could get you in trouble, just to see how you would react to that kind of thing. Because you said it yourself, dude. You go there, you work hard, you do your job, you're not bothering anybody, and you're literally just trying to do a good job. And trust me, I respect respect that. I think that's something that's really good about a worker, and the fact that you're showing those qualities is a good thing. But from the sounds of it, these people are trying to take advantage of you or just try to get you fired entirely. So if this was me, I would 100% be going to like human resources and being like, look, these people are falsely accusing me of stealing. I'm not okay with this and I don't appreciate that. Because this absolutely could be considered them trying to like defame your character and get you in trouble, especially for something that they have no evidence of, aside from them saying, oh, we saw you do it. Like that's the first thing I would do, because trust me, you do not have to put up with this. These people do not have the right to treat you like garbage and make you seem like some kind of criminal because you've done nothing wrong. And then depending on how that conversation goes, like I would absolutely start looking for another job. This does not seem like a place where there's going to be longevity of any kind. It seems like it's full of people who are just a bunch of bullies who are going to mistreat you pretty much no matter what. And that's really not fair for you, and you absolutely do not deserve that.
A rich husband hires a private investigator to watch his wife and then doesn't pay the private investigator. So that PI gets his nuclear revenge against the rich husband because of what he finds in his investigation. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. All of this was originally in Spanish but now translated to English. A few things first. I am a security officer with a private investigator certification, which allows me to take private investigator cases as long as it doesn't interfere with local police investigations, and any crimes that I witness must be reported to the police ASAP so that they can make an arrest. Private investigator cases come from a few sources. We are sometimes contracted by local police to do what's referred to as spotter work, where we are brought on an active wide area investigation to do recon work and look but not interact with anything that might be involved with the case. Basically, we are just an extra pair of eyes. Or the local police will sometimes mix us in a surveillance operation, and we would follow low-profile individuals and report their day-to-day activities. These are completely confidential. Then there is client contracts. This is where corporate clients contract our company's personal investigations unit to investigate their employees' day-to-day activities while on the job to see if there's some hint that an employee is committing a crime, and to report it if there is reasonable proof that an employee is breaking the law on company time. The job is to gather evidence to prove guilt or innocence. These aren't confidential, but we usually sign a non-disclosure agreement. Finally, there is personal contracts. When a person wants to hire a personal investigator to do a job, it's usually something along the lines of a husband or a wife suspects the spouse is cheating on them and wants some kind of proof, or someone is looking for a relative or lost family member and is trying to reconnect with them. There is no disclosure agreement, and it's up to the client to draw up a disclosure agreement. Most people don't, but we keep quiet as a professional courtesy. Now that you understand how the job works, let me tell you what happened. About 3 years ago, I had been hired to do a personal contract. The client, a rich, sleazy snob, was apparently stupid rich. He hired my unit, and when I say my unit, I mean the unit I work from, with a 5-man team. He believed his wife was cheating on him with other people, and he wanted proof of this so he could start his divorce process with solid evidence. He contracted us in a 6-month contract and was to pay the company X amount of dollars upon completion. We set up surveillance cameras all over his large house and in the woman's car with the client's permission. We had at least one of the team tailing her at all times. Good times. Day in, day out, we watched their lives, and in this line of work, you either get detached or emotionally invested, like watching a soap opera. As we watched them, we quickly saw this lady was a saint. She volunteered at a soup kitchen and at a children's hospital. She helped with the local churches, canned food drives, all those kind of things. She was the perfect definition of what a good human should be. On the other hand, the husband was a total jerk. He was the only one we caught many times bringing women to his house. Sometimes he would bring 2 or 3 girls in one day, and that was only what was recorded in the house. We arrive at the 4-month mark, which is basically where we show all the evidence and give the 3/4 report. We show him everything that we found and have a 6-hour debrief with video and audio support showing that she hadn't done any wrongdoing other than a speeding ticket and a few double park situations. After we concluded the debrief, he looked stupefied. He says,
"So you didn't catch a cheating then? What was the point of me hiring you?"
My boss, our captain, turns to him with a serious stare, which is perhaps perhaps the most intimidating looking face I've ever seen in that man and said, "You hired us to investigate your wife. You're unhappy that your wife is an honest and faithful woman?" The snob is visibly annoyed. He stands up, getting his jacket, when my captain says, "Look, there are still 2 months on the contract. We will keep tailing her and we'll meet again after our contract is up and give you any updates." The snob turns to him and says,
Don't bother. This is over. I'm ending it. Come when she's not home and get your equipment out.
So a week later, we did exactly that. Now, food for thought. When contracts like this are made, a small portion is paid up front as a commission fee, and the rest is paid at the end of the contract's allotted time. In this case, it is 6 months. Now, pay works like this. The commission is divided up between each private investigator as a bonus to our salary, and the salary is what we get from the company to get us through the completion of the contract. The remaining balance after being paid by the client is then divided into a cut for completion for the private investigators and a cut for the office. It's good money when done right. So fast forward to the next payday after the contract is officially over. My unit gets a call from our office to come in on the next payday as there is an emergency meeting regarding us and the last contract. We get there and we find out the snob pulled the funding and refused to pay us for the work. So we're getting paid, just not with the completion bonus. We all left super pissed. We went to lunch and brainstormed how to get even with this guy. Then we remembered all of the house footage of his dirty deeds. At first, we wanted to blackmail him, but that's low and we're better than that. I remembered the wife, so I reached out to her. I set a date to sit down and explain everything to her. I showed her the videos and she cried for a good half an hour. I think I broke her whole world. It was gut-wrenching. I then advised her to get a lawyer and proceeded to give her a copy of all of the collected evidence and my business card. The aftermath. Fast forward about 6 months, I'm called into court as my company is suing him for fraud, breach of contract, and unpaid dues. My company wins the case easily as his lawyer's argument was that we failed to deliver the result that he wanted. But we weren't hired to deliver a product. We were hired to observe and report. In the end, we got paid. I was contacted as I was leaving the courthouse by the wife who thanked me for all the evidence. She got a divorce. Because of all the evidence I gave her, she got almost everything. His huge house, both cars, and a huge cash sum. The moral of this story is, don't try to screw over the people who specialize in gathering evidence and reconnaissance. But there's a little bit more because there was an update in the future. A lot of people asked about the wife. I promised I'd look into it, and I did. I got in touch with her, and we agreed to meet with her yesterday. She was delighted to hear from me. We met up at a local coffee shop, and I got to meet her new husband. And she now has 2 kids, both girls that are cuties and so well behaved with him. And she's pregnant with the third, confirmed that it's a boy. She's been remarried for almost 2 years now. After a few coffees and an idle chat, she told me about her own petty revenge story. Now keep in mind, this is what she told me about her petty revenge, so take it with a grain of salt. She told me that the family of Super Snob, her ex-husband, demanded that they get the house back as it's their family ancestral home and offered to buy the house from her almost immediately after the divorce hearing. She had a realtor come and evaluate the house. The family wanted to give her $250,000, but the realtor concluded that the house value was near $1.5 million. The family kept demanding that she sell over the following months. So even though the realtor told her the house was valued at $1.5 million, she told the family that the realtor showed her these documents that said that the house was worth $5 million and that she would be putting it back on the market up for sale soon at that price, $5 million. But she would sell it to them first because they were like family for a big discount of $3.5 million, and they bought the house the next day. So the pleasant evening with her and her new husband ended, and as I'm leaving, the wife smiles at me and grabs the sleeve of my arm. She says, "Wait, I never got to say this, but I want to tell you, thank you. You are a blessing that rescued me." She then reached into her purse to get her wallet. I think she's gonna hand me money or something, and I raise my hand to stop her. She smiles and pulls out my old business card. She said, "I tried to call you and your company a year ago to thank you, but the numbers on the card were disconnected. I wanted to know if you could update your contact information for me." I ask her why, and she continues smiling and says, "Because you're the kind of person I like. You were looking out for me when I needed it, and I want to keep you in my back pocket just in case." I updated my contact information for her and was invited with my family to their home for dinner on Friday. The icing on the cake as of yesterday is, this morning I amazingly got a call from my boss. He was very excited to tell me me that we, specifically you, have a new client who has offered you a 5-year employment contract. Apparently, the wife's new husband is a magistrate and was able to get this contract approved with the provision that I oversee this as the new captain, which means the unit I will be running will be taking our job assignments directly from the court. So thank you to everyone that suggested that I check up on her. I just went to meet her for a coffee and a chat, and I ended up gaining a high-profile client in the process. So am I the jerk for taking all of my investigation findings and using them against the husband that hired me but didn't end up paying us? There were a lot of layers to this story. I didn't expect more things to happen after he took all of his findings and presented them to the wife. As we said at the beginning, this was originally in Spanish, so I'm assuming this whole thing took place in a Spanish-speaking country, and therefore the way the court system and all of that is probably different than it is in other English-speaking countries. But the part that's interesting in the second half of this is when the ex-wife says that the family only wanted to give her $250,000, even though the house was valued at $1.5 million. Because at first I thought, why wouldn't they just look up to see how much the house was worth on its own before paying the $3.5 million? But I think that they probably knew that they were overpaying on the house by a lot. I highly doubt they were duped into not checking the price before they paid for the house, but I think they were willing to pay that much over the value of the house because it was more valuable to them. It was their ancestral house. And I think the ex-wife in the situation probably knew how bad they wanted the house, so even without inflating the price to $5 million, she probably still would have got more than the $1.5 million it was worth regardless. Going back to the first part of the story though, I cannot imagine how the husband thought this was going to end well when he didn't pay the people that he hired to do surveillance on not only his wife's life, but on his life as well. What did he think was going to happen? Let me know what your theories are down below and how you would have handled the situation yourself if you were the private investigator. And also, jerk or not a jerk, and why? Am I the jerk for making a real-life Pokédex of girls at my university? So freshman year of college, I began working on this project casually. I like to keep notes on women I talk to about their favorite things, activities they enjoy, gifts or candies they like, sappy stuff like that. I suck at remembering things like that, so I decided to keep a spreadsheet. Eventually, after getting a handful of entries, I offhandedly mentioned it to my friend group. One had the idea that I share it with them so we could all keep the new entries as they caught different entries. So this expanded further. Right now, about 40 guys have access to it, and it's mainly the guys in my frat, and the women featured are girls from different sororities. We also added more information such as like where you should take them if you really want to impress them. We don't keep this information for any nefarious or scumbaggy reasons. It just helps us to know what to do if we want to impress certain girls. Like the original idea of this was just to keep information like favorite color, so I didn't ever forget their favorite colors. Now it's helping a lot of guys. Somehow a girl who was on the list found out and she was pissed off. She was eventually able to trace it back to me, so I assume someone who was simping for her snitched when the Pokédex wasn't making the girl like him. So she's pissed off and she made it out to be a guide to hooking up with women, when it's most definitely not that. It's just to make impressing them on dates easier. That's it. She made a big deal of this, telling so many girls around campus. Now they're all saying that by the start of the fall semester, none of them will be visiting our fraternity or going to our parties. Now all the guys are mad at me when I'm not even the one who told the girls about the list, and they were also all using the list. I also think it's unfair to say the list was all about carnal desires when it wasn't at all. I'm not a stalker. There was no information in it that could have been used to hurt someone, only to have a better date. And it wasn't about doing the deed. I never used it for doing the deed. So am I the jerk for making a real life Pokédex of girls at my university? I'm not sure how impressed a girl would be that you knew random details or facts about her life. I don't think that's gonna make a girl suddenly not like you, start liking you because they know that you know their favorite color or whatever. As someone in the responses said, if I was approached by a guy who knew a bunch of stuff about me, I'd likely be suspicious too. Why? Because why would you want to impress me? Likely because you want to get into my pants. And then of course calling it a Pokédex like you gotta catch them all is probably not gonna make a girl super stoked to talk to you once she finds out that you were getting her information from this Pokédex. The original poster's theory is that someone was simping for this girl when he snitched, and that's why this whole thing fell apart. And he did say that it wasn't for nefarious reasons, he was just using it for the girls he was dating, but yet the guy that gave out this information, the one who he said was simping, probably didn't according to him because it wasn't getting her to like him. So the expectation was that this information would get girls to like them in a way that wouldn't be possible otherwise, which could be considered nefarious depending on how you look at this. But how do you see the situation? Jerk or not a jerk, and why? A man harassed me, so I got his retirement benefits taken away. This took place over 3 years ago, give or take some. I'm a 29-year-old female. I left the military and picked up a contracting job in the same field. While I was starting my new career, I was also leaving an unhappy and hurtful marriage. My ex-husband, who was 29, was a store manager at GameStop, and when asked if he gave military discounts, he would give a military discount and ask if people knew me on base and what I was up to. A man we will call Bubble Base, who I think is 35, actually worked for me, and the two of them bonded over their mutual hate for women. Bubble Base would refer to me as a trollop and a floozy at work, and even went so far as to attempt to get my home address to give to my ex. I reported the incidents through proper channels and had to get a new apartment, but unsurprisingly the military did nothing to Bubble Base. So I decided to keep my eyes on him and wait until he made another misstep. The next 3 years working with him was horrible. He would undermine my authority in the section by telling junior people that I was stupid, being intentionally insubordinate, and publicly talking about how he was exploiting the foster care system to make money off of the children he was supposed to be taking care of. About a year ago, another girl who was 20 years old came to me and told me that Bubble Base was approaching her in a way that made her uncomfortable. When I pulled up their chat logs, Bubble Base was begging her to do the deed with him even though he was married, and she was repeatedly telling him that she wasn't interested. I convinced the girl to report Bubble Base despite her hesitation. During the investigation, while I was interviewed, I spared no detail about what exactly Bubble Base was doing and saying, to include fraud, waste, abuse of government assets and systems. I literally kept a list with dates and times. As things turned out, there were about 4 other women at our base Bubble Base was harassing. Bubble Base went to non-judicial punishment this week and lost everything. He has 18 years in the military and was 2 years away from a full retirement. He lost his clearance, he lost his foster children, he lost his honorable discharge. He is literally starting life over in his 30s with a discharge that shows that he harasses women with no benefits and 18 years of training in a job field that is only relevant if he has a clearance. Am I the jerk for the role that I played in this because of how he treated me 3 years ago and biding my time until the right moment to strike? It wasn't really the original poster here that had a hand in his downfall. There were 4 other girls plus the girl who was currently having this issue and the OP herself. So in other words, he had lots of people he did this to. Maybe none of them would have ever spoken up, but from what the OP says, they've all had to deal with him. But in her own personal experience with him, he's going out into the real world and telling people that she is a trollop and a floozy and tried to get her personal information to her ex-husband. That is twisted. There's obviously a lot more to this story in terms of why is a relationship like this, unless the answer is just he's like that with every woman, in which case it was only a matter of time until he lost his job and his clearance. So let me know how you would have handled a situation like this down below, and jerk or not a jerk, and why. Am I the jerk for not wanting strangers in the background of my wedding pictures? I'm a 24-year-old female, and recently I had my wedding on the beach of a beautiful hotel in Cancun. Many of my friends and family could go, so I was very happy. The only problem was that during our ceremony there were people on the sea playing or doing jet ski activities. It really bothered me because they would appear in the background, so I told my wedding planner about it. She was very understanding and she said she would fix it. When she talked to the owners of the activities and to the people in that area of the sea, we expected them to be kind and nice, but they just declined and continued. I even took the time to go myself and ask them to stop, but they didn't care. I was about to go and tell someone from the hotel, but now my husband stopped me and said it would be a jerk thing to do. I told him standing up for myself wasn't a jerk thing to do, and I went to look for hotel staff, but they said there was nothing that they could do. When I returned, my husband was moody, and I wonder if it really was a jerk thing to do. Am I the jerk for not wanting strangers in the background of my wedding pictures? You can't control who's going to be on a public beach. As much as you would want people not to be in the background of the photos, all those other people have a right to be there too. But if this was your wedding, how would you handle it? Let me know down below, and jerk or not a jerk, and why. I moved into an apartment with a roommate last summer. When we first came in, the biggest part of the sale was the fact that the apartment was freshly renovated and soundproof. This is important and you'll see why. So when we got in, my roommate immediately fell in love with it and I was too. When we moved in, we were very careful not to bother anyone as we wanted to quickly have a good relationship with our neighbors. Oh, did you see the new neighbors? They only moved in during the day. They don't make sound during the night. What nice people, kind of deal. And we can say that it safely worked. What we did not know, however, is that there were only 3 renters when we first came in. Us on the first floor, another family upstairs on the opposite side, and another one on the 3rd floor with one empty apartment between us. It turns out the soundproof statement was accurate, but only in regards to the inside to outside situation. When our upstairs neighbors moved in, it was a nightmare. Sound from 5 a.m. to past midnight, 5 days in a row, dropping stuff, speaking loudly, yelling or walking in their apartment with their shoes on. Out of frustration on the 5th day, I walk upstairs and meet my neighbor at midnight. I ask them to cease their activities for the night. I have work in the morning and I cannot be up all night. I understand they were freshly moved in and they might have had a tight schedule, but midnight was too late to be moving stuff. He did not reply. He just closed the door on me. I go downstairs and the sound starts over again. I notify my landlord and he tells me that he'll handle it and apologize for the situation, explaining to me that my neighbor was just moving and that he probably didn't understand what I was saying because of the language barrier. The neighbors were extremely loud. I know a lot of Karens will use that as an excuse to shower their neighbors with hate, but when I say loud, I mean it. There was no stop to their loud noises. It seemed like they couldn't be bothered to hold something without dropping it, or jumping up and down on the floor, or purposefully banging the bed frame against the wall when doing the deed. I recorded the event and even installed microphones in my home, jacked straight into my computer, activating and recording every time there was a strong vibration in the house. Over 98 events on a Monday. This was February 14th. I was livid. I sent that to the landlord and explained that this cannot continue. The first apartment was poorly soundproofed, which meant we were hearing every sound all the time. Second, we had notified the neighbors about the situation and they have ignored it. I've notified the landlord to awaken them to our situation. I report the issue several times and even advised my landlord that there were very heavy sounding thuds coming from upstairs, which worried me. He answered with,
"Stop complaining about your neighbors already. I've got other things to do."
I answered, "Understood, sir. Please be advised this will be my last communication and action to help you in that regard." You know when I said I hear loud bangs? It turns out our upstairs neighbor was doing bench press lifting in his living room and the heavy thuds I kept hearing were him dropping his weights on the ground. I had warned my roommate about removing anything she didn't want broken from the living room, and lo and behold, 4 days later, the first crack appeared, then another. The floor was giving out. I moved the couch out of the way and moved the TV and the consoles into the bedroom. Fast forward to 3 days ago, after another loud series of bangs, I hear a loud crack, followed by, "Oh snap!" And then there were very loud noises. I went to the living room to see my neighbor on the ground with several actually gruesome injuries due to the fact that he just went through the floor and brought his bench and weight rack with him. I called an ambulance and the police asked me if I reported the issue with my landlord, which I could confirm due to my communication being made via email. I sent everything, and I am now, of course, filing to break my lease due to uninhabitable dwelling. The landlord came in yesterday and just proceeded to explode. Told me that I should have made him aware that my neighbor was doing dangerous things, to which I answered I had notified him about the very loud sounds and he never investigated, and that he also ordered me to stop complaining about my neighbors. It was not my responsibility to go out of my way to protect his assets if he is unwilling to cooperate with me. My neighbors, my roommate, and I are now residing in a hotel until we can find a new place to live. We are also looking towards adding a bit more salt to the injury by maybe filing for criminal negligence against both our landlord and the neighbor. The first because the apartment was apparently having some flaws, and the latter for endangering us. Had I not caught up on what caused the sound earlier, me, or God forbid my roommate, could have been under that. Anyway, it was a fun week and I do enjoy the accommodations of my hotel. I never went to a 4-star spa-included hotel before. It turns out the chocolate on the pillow is a lie and I am very disappointed about that. As I have advised to a few commentators, I followed up with my roommate, but she did not take pictures of the event. She got a bit mad that I asked, considering what had just happened and questioned my priorities. I then explained that our story got a lot of attention and some people in the comments requested some visual proof. I will spare you her answer. I'll just add that it's okay not to believe the story based on my word alone. If people didn't actually question it, I would be worried. When I first posted this story, my only intent was to share my experience and I thought, malicious compliance, neat. If there was a horrible landlord or bad neighbor forum I would have found prior to submitting the story, then I probably would have posted there instead. I'm also going to add that I'm not an expert or an engineer. How and why something like weights and the like would cause part of the floor to collapse, I cannot say. Was there any structural damage prior? Was there water damage that was never addressed, just covered up? Was the structure just not as sound as I believed it was when I got in? I cannot say. I understand some of you might have worked in construction and never experienced such an event or have actual reasons to suspect a lie due to personal and professional experience. Once again, you can and should question anything on the internet. I just hope you can also apply that kind of skepticism, and I mean wanting proof or the opinion of an actual expert prior to making a decision, to more than just posts. So, jumping forward into the future, there is an update. My brother has agreed to take the case and look at the options. We are not feeling very vindictive and our insurance is going to cover most of the costs, so we might file for negligence. I'm not a lawyer myself and I don't know the terms in English, but basically the landlord should have had his building inspected before renting, which was apparently not done. The landlord has apparently calmed down after the event and has apologized for everything. He has scheduled a visit from inspectors to check the integrity of the apartment and the cause of the damage that would have allowed a human and exercise equipment to go through the floor and the ceiling. In exchange for not pressing charges, he has agreed to reimburse all the money we have invested into the rent, our stay at the hotel, and a little extra as an apology and the guarantee to either repair the apartment and soundproof it properly, or if it is not an option, to go back. He will relocate us onto another of his buildings, which are a lot better than what we had, reduce our rent quite significantly for as long as we stay, with papers to back this offer up in writing, and a full year of rent for free. This is actually quite generous in the current rent market. I'm leaving the final say to the roommate. On my end, I was not injured, she was not, and this could have just been a freak accident. Yes, the landlord is a bit of a jerk, but let's be honest, we've all had worse landlord-wise. Plus, even if we take him up on his offers, the upstairs neighbor might be looking at some severe reparation. He did get injured after all, but we would be happy to hear about your opinion. What would you say? Take this further or just take the refund plus the full year, rent-free year, and then low rent for the years to come? And that brings us to the final update. After a long time of deciding what to do, we have opted to take the landlord's offer. However, we made it clear that we could not live under the same people if the soundproofing was not at the very least improved. We went to my brother's office and met with a colleague of his who had multiple documents for us to sign. One of them for the promise of low rent. The landlord wanted to offer $250 off the market price, and we negotiated up to $300 off to be applied to all of our leases. We also agreed to the reimbursement of 6 months of rent, which will cover us for the next year and then some, plus the free year. We received about $5,000 each, and the landlord has agreed to cover all the costs of the hotel we and our parents had to pay. We might be moving back into our apartment by the end of the month. It's a bit disappointing as we wanted to try another place, but from what I understand, there is a very good chance our neighbors are not moving back on their end, so it might just be back to the ideal scenario. There will be some very heavy renovation done and a thorough inspection of the structure before we move back in. So was I the jerk for my malicious compliance towards my landlord when he told me to stop complaining about my neighbors already, that he had other things to do, which ended up with me not saying anything and the neighbor above us falling through the floor and costing the landlord a lot of money? It sounds like as soon as the OP got analytical and started measuring exactly what was happening and recording everything, then that's when the OP stopped taking him seriously. He started thinking, oh, he's just one of those type of guys that every little disturbance is going to be a complaint. Because if you remember, the moment that the landlord gave up on everything and said, stop complaining about your neighbors already, I have other things to do, was the same moment that the OP gave him the report that 98 events happened according to his microphone recording that he had in his computer. And falling straight through the floor, the only time I've ever heard of something like that happening is when there was either water damage currently or there previously was water damage and it was never addressed and then it just rotted over time. I'm sure it can happen in other situations, but those seem to be the times that I hear about it happening the most. And when you add really heavy workout equipment on top of it and with him dropping it, along with progressive cracks, that is pretty brutal. The OP said he had to call the ambulance for the guy, but I wonder how severe his injuries were, because if he had a barbell with weights fall on him from the story above to the story below, along along with the weight rack and everything else, if you even survive that, there's a chance you could have some pretty serious injuries, lifelong injuries. But in the end, the landlord apologized to the OP and offered some pretty generous concessions because of the whole thing. I mean, he was willing to pay for an entire year of their rent and perpetually have them locked in at some sort of rent control, lowered rent rate, and reimburse them for their money. That is pretty above and beyond. I don't know if that's a requirement for this area or he just wanted to do that on his own, but either way, that's going to set the OP up to be in a position where he could actually save for a house or something because he's not having to worry about his living expense. But with all of that said, what would you have chosen between those options the landlord presented? How would you have handled the situation? Would you have been maliciously compliant like the OP was? And who was the jerk? Let me know down below. Am I the jerk for wanting to kick my sister out for talking to my daughter about how great her escorting job is? I want to start by saying that I fully support my sister's career choice and I am not interested in comments debating the morality of what she's doing. My sister is an escort. She came to visit us last weekend. She was planning on spending the summer with us since we haven't seen each other for 3 years. When she told us about this, my daughter was ecstatic. They have a great relationship and she helped me raise her after her mom died. When my parents first found out about my sister's job, they denounced her, told her that she was bringing shame to the family and that she would rot in hell. I tried convincing them to change their mind and that treating my sister that way isn't going to do anything good, but they told me that it was none of my business and that I should stop defending her. My sister became depressed because of that and she stopped working. When she couldn't afford rent, I brought her to my house. I told her that she is my baby sister and that I will always be by her side and take care of her no matter what. She started getting better week by week and after a few months, she got back to being her former happy self. Back to the present day. Last Friday, when I got back home from work, I overheard them talking in my daughter's room. My daughter was asking her aunt about her job. My sister, her aunt, started telling her about how much fun it is and that she gets to visit many new places and meet new people, and how she gets to decide when she wants to work, which allows her to take breaks whenever she wants, so she gets to visit and spend all summer with us. My daughter told her that her job is so cool and how she's looking forward to spend time with her and all the fun activities they will get to do in the summer. The next morning, I told my sister that I overheard them and that I didn't appreciate the way that she explained her work, making it seem all fun with no downside. She told me that my daughter wasn't old enough to hear about the dangerous stuff, and I told her that she doesn't get to decide that. And since she felt that my daughter was old enough to hear about her job, then she is definitely old enough to hear about the downsides. When my sister was living with us, I always had to be on alert. Many times she called me to get her out of uncomfortable and dangerous situations. I had to wake my neighbor in the middle of the night multiple times to watch my daughter while I went down to get her. And to this day, she still sends me her location whenever she is meeting someone so that I could alert the police in case she doesn't text me afterwards. I told her that she needs to leave by the end of the week if she doesn't want to explain the risks of her job in age-appropriate terms to my daughter. She told me that I was cruel for doing this because I know how much they love each other and how much she was looking forward to spending time with us. But before you decide jerk or not a jerk, there is an update. I spoke with my sister early in the morning while my daughter was still asleep. I explained to her how important it is to me that she talks to my daughter about the risks of her job because she would actually listen to her aunt more than me, especially now when she's reached the stage of "Dad isn't cool anymore" and "You are wrong" to whatever I say to her. And I reminded her how much I want us to spend the summer together. I told her that I'm not a young man anymore and it's unlikely that I will be there for my daughter when she grows up in the same way I was for her, so I need to know if I could count on her. I reminded her that she isn't obligated to share the details with her, just mention the bad side. Generally, unfamiliar locations, stranger men, increased risk of the unspeakable act happening to you / bodily harm, STDs, illegal substance use, etc. And then we can both answer any questions she might have together if she isn't comfortable answering them alone. My sister apologized, saying that she was selfish and admitted that she should have thought about me and my daughter first instead of refusing because she thought my daughter isn't old enough to hear about the bad side, and promised she'll talk to my daughter about this over breakfast. I overheard the whole conversation, and like I thought, my daughter was very receptive of her aunt. My sister was reluctant at first, but after seeing her niece's engagement, they ended up talking for over an hour, sharing her good and bad experiences and some funny stories. To clarify, my daughter is 14 years old. She even told my daughter about how I stood up for her against our parents after the reaction and the many times I came to her rescue. I told my sister afterwards how much I appreciated what she did for me and her niece, and she assured me that she will always be there for me and she'll always take care of her niece like I did with her. In the afternoon, while I was working in the garage, my daughter came to me and hugged me, saying that she loves me. I was fighting back tears and I failed because it was the first time in over a year that she hugged me, and I think it was the first time since primary school that she said I love you to me. I still told her I love her every day, but she didn't say it back to me, even though I understand it's normal for some teenagers. It was actually heartbreaking for me each time she didn't say it back. She watched me work for a few minutes and left without saying anything. To the people who told me I must insist on my sister talking to her and not accept her refusal, and also to the people who informed me about the risks of trafficking, and while I am glad that wasn't the case, I appreciate it because it made me take this much more seriously. And also to all the other valuable comments and tips. I am honestly just relieved after a long week of stress, and this made me realize again how lucky I am to have both of them in my life. So, was I the jerk for wanting to kick my sister out for talking to my 14-year-old daughter about how great escorting is? It sounds like the brother has really been there for the sister his whole life, and probably vice versa because they both have an immense amount of respect for each other. It seems like this just was a hiccup or a misunderstanding, probably because the sister has been so defensive because everyone treats her job in a really negative light, and she probably reactively thought that he was doing the same thing too. They don't say it explicitly, but it seems like it has to be obvious that the aunt, the sister, is actually explicitly saying to the 14-year-old girl that she is escorting. Because at first I thought that maybe they were just saying, oh, auntie's job is this thing and it's dangerous. But the further we got in, the more it seems that no, she actually says what she does, which is going to be an interesting perspective for that daughter to have as she enters her own adulthood. Even though he doesn't directly say it, it sounds like the OP is a little bit conflicted because most dads wouldn't want their daughters to be in that line of work, but at the same time, he also wants to respect his sister because she's already had what I'm sure he feels is enough hardship she's had to deal with because of her career choice. So if this was your family, your sister, and your daughter, how would you handle this situation, and jerk or not a jerk, and why? A power-hungry Karen tries to exert her will on me at work, but it ends up backfiring and she loses her job, all because of my malicious compliance. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I once had a project manager named Shirley and a coworker named Alex. I was a computer programmer. Every morning, we, along with half a dozen other people, had a 5-minute long meeting to discuss our progress and give people a chance to ask each other stuff. The boss was away on a 2-week vacation, and while he was away, the meetings were slightly more important so we could coordinate ourselves without him to do it. Right before the meeting, I had come to a roadblock because I could remember what something in the programming was called. I just needed an actual word and I could continue, and I knew that Alex would know it. At the meeting, Alex did his thing. A few other people talked, then it was my turn. I explained what I had done yesterday and what I was working on and said, "Hey Alex, do you remember?" At this point, Shirley interrupted me and threw a screaming fit at me. How dare I try to have a discussion with someone without her? I pointed out that she was standing right there and she demanded to know how dare I talk to someone without it being a scheduled meeting in the conference room in her presence. I pointed out that this was a scheduled meeting. We were in the conference room and we were there in her presence. How dare I presume to ask anyone anything without notifying her in advance that I would be doing so? I tried to explain that it was only a very brief question and she flipped out that how dare I try and talk back to her like this? So having gotten an idea, I asked when we could have this meeting. She said 3 p.m. I knew that she had nothing to do before then. She just wanted to have something she could feel smug about. It was 9:34 a.m. at the time. She ordered that I was not to discuss it with anyone before the meeting and I was not to proceed on the task without it, or I'd just be proving that it actually wasn't important and I was wasting anyone's time. The meeting ended and we left. Alex worked about 10 feet away from me, so I could have just walked over and asked him, but I didn't. He sent me an instant message to know if I wanted to ask him whatever while she couldn't hear, and I replied that no, she wanted to be rude about it so she could reap the rewards of her actions. Alex and I had lunch every day, but I declined to talk about it. He knew I was up to something. At 3 p.m., he and I went into the conference room. 10 minutes later, she swanned in, closed the door, sat down, opened her notebook, uncapped her pen, wrote down the date and time and who was there, and told me that I was now authorized to proceed. I said, "Hey Alex, do you remember last week when we did that thing? You used a thingy that did that thing. What was it called?" He told me what it was called, and I said, "Great, thanks." And he and I both turned to leave. It had taken all of about 20 seconds. Shirley flew into a rage. She said,
"You deliberately make a mockery of me!"
Apparently, I did this by scheduling a meeting for something that would have taken 20 seconds. As I left the room, I said, "Shirley, I warned you that this was only a 1-minute exchange, but you insisted on a meeting." She didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. I made sure my timesheet reflected that I spent 9:35 to 3 p.m. doing nothing / waiting for Shirley. A day or two later, she flew into a rage at me again, and the entire staff was so enraged. They told me they were quitting and asked me to join them. I asked them to wait a couple of days, called my boss and told him, and on the next business day, I found that he had returned early from his vacation and fired her. Oh, and a random factoid. Over a year later, Alex and I both moved to another company. We both went to the same one. When we arrived, we found that Shirley was already there. We both went to the boss and told him that under no circumstances were either of us ever willing to have a meeting with her without him. He told us that she was already not in good favor, but he'd make sure to not allow it to happen. Actually, he went to the CEO and told him that under no circumstances would anyone from the whole department meet with her ever. I saw her power walk around the corner to meet with someone down the hall, see me, turn around and power walk back the other direction. She walked a long way around the office to come out on the other end of the hallway so that she could go into her meeting without passing me. She took the long way every day for a few weeks. Then came the day that she threw a screaming fit that could be heard across the office, stormed out, and was never seen again. The secretary, knowing I had worked with her before, asked me if I knew what her home address was so that he could mail her things from her office, which she didn't bother to take to her home. I didn't know it, and I suggested he ask HR. He couldn't be bothered. I think she had pissed him off too. And a year later, all of her stuff was still in a box ready to be sent to her. I think they got thrown out eventually. So was I the jerk for acting the way that I did that ultimately ended up playing a role in the reason why Shirley lost her job? The best part about this is that the OP stayed so true to the plan that he didn't even tell his friend Alex what he was going to tell him in this scheduled meeting. That is some true malicious compliance. He followed Shirley's orders so perfectly that it pissed her off, and she felt like he was deliberately making a mockery of her. At the new job, I wish we did know what was the final straw that set her off, but it sounds like she's prone to exploding like that in general, because even before that final moment, the new boss told them that she was already not on good terms with a lot of people. So I guess in the end, it could have been anything. But let me know what you would have done if you were in this situation, and have you ever been maliciously compliant? Let me know down below, jerk or not a jerk, and why. My boss did me dirty and tried to extort me. So in exchange, I used malicious compliance to start a dumpster fire in the workplace. Here's how it happened. This happened almost 5 years ago. Some details are intentionally vague. This will be a longer one, but I promise you, it will be worth it at the end. I was working in an organization that was super toxic, so much so that we were a revolving door. Most employees stayed only for a few months. To counter this, our management put a 3-month notice into everyone's contract, including the existing employees. It's not strictly illegal where this happened, but very unusual. I believe the idea behind that was to make it harder for the employees to find a job outside, as potential employers usually didn't want to wait for 3 months. However, this didn't work, as most people simply quit and waited for a month or two before starting their job hunt. I was there for almost 4 years. I needed the money, so I put up with whatever abuse was thrown at me. My boss was a guy we'll call Vince. Now, Vince was not particularly good, but sometimes respected the fact that I was the most tenured grunt in this organization. Do know that after about 2 years, I was doing a lot of additional work in addition to my official responsibilities, primarily because I was the only one who knew how to do those. Everyone else had already left. This will be important later. Enter Enter Rajesh. Rajesh was poached from a somewhat infamous company and was literally flown in from a different continent. He was brought in to, quote, strategically improve our division. This was quite strange given that our division generated the most profits. Within months, Rajesh made the environment even more toxic. He pulled Vince's team under him and got Vince fired, and he actively encouraged us grunts to spy on each other. Rajesh also had it out for me from day one. Until today, I don't know why. He started making my life much harder than the others. This culminated in him taking me aside and telling me that I was not pulling my weight. Now at this point, I was doing quite well in the organization. Plus, I had been doing a lot of additional work critical to our business since only I knew certain systems and processes, hence the high attrition. So I was quite angry. I started looking out. I wasn't still brave enough to quit and start looking. Fortunately, I was able to find a job that was willing to wait the 3 months. So now it was my turn to take Rajesh aside and tell him that I quit. First, when I pulled him aside, he said,
Is it time already for you to ruin my day?
Boy, Rajesh was pissed. He went from denial
Just when I thought you couldn't get any stupider. You can't quit.
to
What if I give you a raise at the year end?
before acceptance. Thus, I was serving my notice and working away like an honest bee. My usual work plus the additional work. At this point, I was called in by HR and told that Rajesh wanted me gone. The insane part was that they wanted me to pay the company for the 2.5 months shortfall in notice. I obviously refused, then went back and checked the contract. Turns out that a notice of less than 3 months could only happen through mutual consent, and the initiating party, the company if they wanted me gone sooner, or me if I wanted to leave earlier, had to compensate the other party for the shortfall. The next day, I stopped doing almost all of my work. I logged in and logged out my hours and I did nothing. I stopped doing any additional work I had been doing. I started taking it really slow on my primary job responsibilities. Since no one else understood the details of what I did, I knew this would be very hard for Rajesh or HR to prove that I was doing any of this on purpose. Then I sat back with my popcorn. Soon, there was a complete meltdown all around. Rajesh would pull me into meetings and scream and try to bully me, and I would say nothing but smirk to his face. Next, they tried to have someone else learn the additional work I used to do from me so that they could do what I did. Remember when I said earlier how I was the only one who knew some of the old systems and processes? Well, now I claimed I didn't really remember any of them, so obviously there could be no handover. Rajesh could do nothing, as none of this had been my responsibility or part of my contract, since the leadership had been only too happy to see me do this for free. Soon my workplace turned into a dumpster fire. HR/Rajesh smartened up and offered to buy out of my notice if I cooperated and helped transition my work. I refused. Then, to twist the knife further, I started having meetings with fellow grunts. Remember, everyone was always a newbie and encouraging them to leave as well. Indirectly, nothing that could implicate me. HR tried to get me to leave twice, but I ended up serving the full 3 months. Remember the mutual consent part? So basically, because my boss tried to extort me, I started a dumpster fire. Since a lot of people asked, the company is still around. They started outsourcing a lot of work to Asia, specifically the country that Rajesh was originally from, where I believe the labor laws are much less stringent and employees are much more willing to put up with a toxic work environment. Rajesh is also doing very well for himself. He has now moved to yet another country, one that a lot of you may be from, and is with an employer that employs a ton of people. I suspect many of you have or will come in contact directly or indirectly with him. My condolences. So, was I the jerk for my malicious compliance? It's always sad when an employee has worked at a place for quite a long time, in this case 4 years, and the company doesn't seem to care at all. Some of the time, I think it's because the person that is managing them wasn't there when that employee started, but still, all that experience on pretty much any job is going to be valuable. In this case, it happened to be particularly valuable because no one else knew how to operate these systems. That is also something that seems to be pretty common that is weird. If the company vitally relies on these certain processes, how is nobody else learning these things? Or at least if they're transitioning away from them, complete the transition before you just totally forget about it. I can't believe that they wanted the OP to pay the company for the 2.5 months shortfall in the notice. Honestly, this guy sounds like he wasn't treated very fairly at all. Over a long period period of time, and when they realized that he had them in a bind, they wanted to undo their mistakes and buy him out, but he didn't want to do that. But what would you do if you're in this situation? Would you use the malicious compliance, or would you handle this some other way? Let me know down below in jerk or not a jerk and why. I just found out that my wife was married as a joke in Las Vegas in 1997. I need some help on where to go from here. My wife and I are about to celebrate our 15th anniversary in a few weeks. Long ago, when we first got together, she told me that she married one of her gay guy co-workers in Las Vegas as a joke when she was a teenager. Honestly, I thought she was full of it and that it probably wasn't a legal thing anyway. Well, now I read another post on legal advice about a guy who might have gotten married to a stranger in Las Vegas. Someone on his post added a link to the Clark County marriage record search. I put her name in, and holy smokes, if a certificate didn't pop up. She is sitting next to me ready to puke. She didn't think that it was a legal marriage either. So what do we do now? She didn't really even know this guy that she married, has no idea what happened to him. She is frantically searching Google and Facebook, but no luck in finding him. So I guess our marriage is invalid? We have 2 kids. What does this mean? Were they adopted fraudulently because our marriage certificate is invalid? I will get an attorney tomorrow, but I would like to know what to expect. Question number 1, what if we can't find this guy? Number 2, what if we do find this guy? Number 3, how much trouble are we in for filing our taxes together, getting our names changed, adopting our kids under the pretense that we were married? Question number 4, best case scenario, quickie paper divorce, right? And then what? Do we have to get remarried? To clarify, we live in Arizona and this marriage happened in 1997 in Las Vegas. A little less than a month later, there was an update. Well, we just finished our initial meeting with the attorney. We all agree that we are going to try to get an annulment. The guy has such a common name that it's going to be close to impossible to find him. They will do a search followed by a publication. Then the petition for the annulment will be filed. Annulment is the best case scenario because it will be like it never happened and we can go about our lives. The attorney thinks she has a good chance of it being approved since they never lived together, filed taxes together, or even consummated the marriage. The tricky thing is if the judge doesn't approve the annulment because of our marriage, adoption of our kids, tax filings, etc., we might be in for a world of trouble if she has to file for divorce. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. I'll update when it's all over. Fast forwarding 7 months into the future, there's a final update. The court date for the annulment was today, and the judge granted it. That means it's like it never happened and we can go on with our lives. It would have been a nightmare if he had not granted it because our marriage wouldn't have been legal and it would have major implications on the adoption of our kids and even the filing of our taxes. As for the original wedding, we managed to track down one of the witnesses to the marriage. He was able to tell us that Elvis married them. Who doesn't remember that Elvis married them? And also that it was a double wedding. My wife and her girlfriend each married one of the couple of gay guy friends. They never imagined 22 years ago that gay marriage would ever be legal, and so marriage was like a joke to them. Why they did it, I have no idea, but the other two are still married and don't seem to care since they are still friends. So if you were in this situation, what would you do? So is he saying that his wife doesn't remember that Elvis married them? She doesn't remember that it was legal? Don't you have to sign papers if you're going to get married that actually look like official legal documents? It sounds like the wife was just on a party bender or something if she can't remember any of that stuff. Even if it was 22 years ago, you got to remember if you legally got married or not. Unless the chapel itself was deceiving them somehow and presenting the documents in some other way that wouldn't be obviously clear as to what they were. I do wonder though if they're going to celebrate their 15-year anniversary, or are they going to reset the clock and say, well, technically we've been married for a year, when it ends up being 1 year after this whole thing went down. Either way, it seems like a pretty crazy thing to forget the details of, but if you found out that the person you were married to for 15 years was also married to somebody else before you and made your whole marriage invalid, what would you do? Let me know down below. An entitled woman at the grocery store demands that I do her shopping for her. She hands me a little rolled up grocery list on a piece of paper and tells me to go fetch while she sits down. Then when I refuse, she goes absolutely berserk, to the point that when the police are there, they have to pick her up and slam her. And that's just the start. There is an entire ripple effect that happens because of this moment that leads to an unexpected outcome to this whole situation. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I had had reported to work on this particular Monday where I am the site supervisor for an armed security account, only to discover that the blasted injits that worked the night shift had not only left me an empty coffee pot, which was a mortal sin, but had entirely cleaned me out of coffee, leaving me naught but an empty container devoid of my much needed morning caffeine. The inconsiderate so-and-sos. Grumbling, I go off to the local market to buy some caffeinated goodness, so to keep my heart beating through my busy day. Mind you, I am in uniform, which means black pants, a dress shirt with my badge, and various security emblems, my duty belt with a firearm, baton, handcuffs, etc., etc. For the sake of those squeamish folk out there that go all white in the face when they see an open carry, I have also donned a windbreaker with security written on the back of it in 6-inch high day glow yellow letters. In other words, I looked nothing like any of the folk who worked at this market, whose uniform consisted of a green apron. Now mind you, I probably could have handled this better, but I was grumpy. It was a Monday morning without coffee after all. So I'm just standing there inside the door of the market reading the chalkboard where they have written their menu for the small cafe they run when this entitled wench on her cell phone walks up to me and tries to hand me a slip of paper. Okay, I'm a bit confused, but I take it and I give it a look. But as soon as I do, the entitled woman makes a little shooing motion and walks away and sits down at a bench by the door. She never says a word to me, doesn't really even look at me, barely acknowledges my existence and just walks off. So I'm kind of annoyed, you might say. I look at this piece of paper and it's a list of, you guessed it, groceries. WTH. So I wander over and I politely inquire as to what this is exactly and why had she seen it fit to hand it to me.
That's my grocery list, of course. Fetch them for me now. I'm in a hurry and I can't be bothered. I'm on a very important phone call.
Again, with the shooing motion. Now, I've been going to this market for almost 5 years and I can assure you, they don't fetch your groceries for you. So after some consideration, I very carefully rolled her list into a tight little ball and I dropped it on her lap and loudly growled at her to get off her lazy butt and go do her own shopping. Then I turned around and walked off. I hear screeching out from behind me, but I just ignore her and I keep walking. Now at this point, I am seriously thinking that the entitled woman will take the hint, see the Dayglow letters on my jacket, and buy a clue. But oh no, the entitled woman is just not that smart. She instead chases me down and starts yelling about how she's going to get me fired and how I need to fetch her damn groceries right now. Trying to remain calm, I politely but forcefully tell her again, very clearly, I don't work here. Do your own damn shopping, lady. And then I leave. I thought that was the end of it, so off I go to get a cup of wonderful hot coffee at the cafe and then move on to the aisle of heaven, where I am busily perusing their fine selection of lovely roasted goodness when who should appear but the entitled woman with a gentleman in tow. She is loudly berating him about his lazy workers and demanding that I be fired on the spot. This poor gentleman looks confusedly at me and then at her and then informs her, he doesn't work here, ma'am. We don't employ security, ma'am. Being a bit of a jerk, I wave at her and I give her a big smile and I agree with him. The entitled woman absolutely loses it. She goes completely insane. She starts screaming that I need to fetch her damn groceries right now or she's gonna get all of us fired. And she is an important person and how we will regret treating her this way and blah 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 blah. The gentleman finally gets a word in edgewise and again informs her that I do not work here and I don't have to do anything for her. That's when I see a dim little light bulb go off on her head and I can see a glimmer, tiny but there, of understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. The light is dim, however, quickly squashed by her overinflated sense of entitlement as she promptly replies in the snottiest voice possible. I kid you not, with,
well, he obviously is a menial of some sort. Make him!
To say this got me a tad riled up is perhaps an understatement. I shoved a one-finger salute into her face and told her emphatically to go screw herself. The gentleman quickly got between us and loudly told her in no uncertain terms that, once again, I did not work there, and two, that she needed to get the hell out of his store right now. The entitled woman literally screamed at the top of her lungs. No words, just screaming, just rage, and started demanding to see someone in charge so she could get us all fired and someone better get her damn groceries and how she was gonna sue us all. Didn't we know how important she was? The gentleman, who I had naturally assumed was the manager, promptly got right back in her face and yelled over her that he was the owner. His family had owned the place for 20 years and they had never, in all all that time done someone's shopping for them ever. He then grabbed her by the arm and literally dragged her off towards the front of the store. At that point, I was just shaking my head in disbelief, but I just went ahead, made my selection of fine coffees, and wandered over to stand in line to pay for it. As I'm there at the register, the owner came up to me and actually apologized for the entitled woman's behavior, and we shared a what the heck moment. We actually just ended up laughing about how stupid she was, or crazy, either way. He even tried to let me have the coffee for free, but I thanked him and I told him it wasn't his fault that the entitled woman was a nut, and I was fine paying for it. Now, you would think that was the end of it. I mean, it was crazy, but weird stuff happens and people are idiots, whatever. But oh no. Dear audience, it would appear that we both had underestimated the depths of the entitled woman's craziness, because as we walked through the door to the outside world, who, to our astonishment, was there waiting for us? The entitled woman, it turns out, actually called the police on us, and the dum-dum was out there screaming at the officer, demanding that we be arrested for not serving her, and how she wanted us both fired, and she was going to sue, and that someone had better get her groceries right now, damn it. My jaw dropped. I don't mind saying it. I was beyond shocked. I honestly started laughing at this point. This lady was certifiably nuts. Because of my job, we happened to work closely with the local police department, so I actually recognized the officer that had responded to the call and gave Officer Betsy a wave when she looked at me. She gave me a grin and walked over asking me about exactly what was going on. We both gave our side of the story and the owner asked that she be removed from the property, please, as she was at this point causing a scene. Betsy just rolled her eyes, walked over and told the entitled woman that she needed to leave right now, immediately, or she would be charged with trespassing. Now, you ever have that moment when you can see something bad start to happen, but your mind just can't quite believe it's actually occurring? Well, I saw it start clear as day as the entitled woman reared back and started to go off again. And yup, there it was. She actually jammed her finger into Officer Betsy's sternum, not once, but twice. Might have been a third time, but Officer Betsy had at that point picked her up, flipped her over, and dropped the entitled woman on her head. She landed on top of her, had her handcuffed in record time, got back up, opened her door, slid the entitled woman in the back of her patrol car, and slammed the door on her. And we all just stood there shaking our heads in total disbelief as the entitled woman started to scream and thrash and kick at the windows of the squad car. She was still doing it as Officer Betsy drove off to the station too. I saw Officer Betsy later on that day and she told me that the entitled woman was still throwing a fit when they got to the station and fought the officers there like hell until they ended up stuffing her into a control chair. She was later transported to the hospital for a psych evaluation. No idea what happened to her after that. Well, that is of course until the update. Jumping into the future. So a lot of you have been asking me about what happened to the lovely entitled woman in my tale and want more information, and quite honestly, your request piqued my curiosity as well. So I decided to do some checking, call some people and do some digging. A few things to keep in mind about what I found out and what happened afterwards. First thing is that to me, this was simply a random encounter with a crazy woman in a store that I was at. It had nothing to do with me or my job. It didn't happen on my site, so there was really no reason for me to look into it any further. When Officer Betsy drove off, it was, as far as I was concerned, over and done with. An amusing, if annoying, story to tell my friends and family about, but nothing more. Second thing, no one informed me that anything ever happened to anyone else over this whole deal. I was either deliberately kept out of the loop or my testimony wasn't needed about the events of that day concerning her arrest. I wasn't involved. I was a bystander. I'll explain this in a little bit, but I had no idea what was going on after this. Third thing, this all happened almost a year and a half ago and a lot has changed since then. People have moved on or even passed away in the case of my boss, Andy, the owner of the company that I worked for, and I no longer work there. So some of these folks were a bit hard to track down, and some of this is even second or third hand account of the events that followed this. Okay, so with all of that being said, here is the fallout from the entitled woman's little meltdown. She was put on a 72-hour psych hold, but even worse, while she was in the psych unit, and no, I have no idea how she managed it, she almost unalived herself. From what I heard, it was a close call, but they resuscitated her and she got shipped off to a more secure mental health facility after her attempt. She spent 2 weeks there and ended up having to do mandatory weekly visits to a psychologist for a year because of a court order. And now I kind of feel bad for her because no one should have to go through that kind of thing or be that bad off as to think those dark thoughts was an answer to their problems. But, and this is a huge but, it turns out that her jerk of a husband knew about her problems and deliberately kept her from getting the help she needed because it might hurt his career. Yes, you heard that right. This piece of doo-doo knew she was psychotic. This kind of outburst had apparently happened before, and he was more worried about his job than his wife's mental health. So boo to him. So on to the loving husband of the entitled woman. It turns out he was an attorney working for the city council, not in criminal law, but in civil law. He's pretty high up on the food chain at the city attorney's office though. As soon as he was contacted that she was in custody, he showed up at the jail demanding she be released immediately into his custody, that all charges be dropped, and that the entire incident made to go away, or his very important friends on the city council would be getting involved and heads would roll. Sounds eerily familiar, doesn't it? They did apparently let him in to see her, but otherwise told him to pound sand. So when that didn't work, he went to the chief of police and demanded the same thing, except he upped the ante. He wanted Officer Betsy fired and me and the store owner arrested. She for excessive use of force because of the bruise on her forehead, and me and the owner because we had both injured her while she was in the store. The chief told him to pound sand about releasing her, as that was up to the DA at that point, not him. But there was an investigation carried out about the incident by IAD. I wasn't contacted or informed because when IAD went to the store, the owner, his name was Greg, handed them the security tapes that had captured the whole thing from start to finish, including Officer Betsy arresting her. IAD watched them, said this is nonsense, and told the husband to pound sand. This I got from now Sergeant Betsy. Congrats on the promotion. Of course, this wasn't good enough for the husband. Over the course of the next 8 months or so, the store got inspected 6 times by the city health department, 4 times by the city fire marshal, and had their taxes audited by the state. All entirely innocent, nothing to do with this incident, and of course the husband wasn't involved. So the owner of the store was assured by the city council member that he complained to about this harassment. It finally ended when the husband was named in the suit filed against the city by my company. This gets even crazier, so here's what happened. My boss Andy, the owner of our company, got a phone call from the husband demanding that I immediately be fired or bad things would happen to the company. This I got firsthand from our office manager Misty, as he had talked to her first and made much the same threats to her. Misty decided to record the conversation at that point, and so the entire conversation the husband had with Andy was captured on tape, and Misty stayed on the line as a further witness to the conversation that the husband had with Andy, the owner of our company. It's not the first time my company has been threatened with legal action, so that part was SOP on her part, standard operating procedure. She also contacted our lawyers as soon as "I'm gonna sue" left the husband's lips. One thing you should know about Andy was that he was a retired state police officer. He doesn't take being threatened very well, and he lit into this turd with both barrels. Misty said the nicest thing he said to the husband was F you. She actually dug up the recording for me. We listened to it over a few drinks and it was great. Then the husband tried to torpedo our company as well, except he ran into a few problems. Number one, we were not located in that city and we had just one contact there, mine. And there was no way the city council could get our contract pulled at that site, although they did try because the management company that ran the complex at that time was both very pleased with our performance and because the property itself was owned by a huge real estate company that does business all over the country and wasn't even based in the state. And if there was some complaint filed with them, no one I talked to had heard of it. Number two, security companies like mine are licensed through the state, not the city. And guess who does the licensing? The state police. In particular, the licensing department is run by Andy's best friend and longtime partner. Strange, isn't it? LOL. So when this jerk had someone from the city council try calling to get our business license revoked, he was given a very emphatic piss off. Did I mention that all phone calls to the state police are recorded? And guess who had a few drinks that night with Andy and just happened to let slip this little nugget of information, which was also passed on to our lawyers, who ended up subpoenaing asking the state police about it and was disclosed in the court case. This ended up being quietly settled out of civil court with a nice bonus to Andy's retirement account after almost a year of being quiet. Misty had no idea how much money it was, but Andy was grinning like a fool for 3 days straight after he got the check. It's a shame he didn't live to enjoy it. But after that, there was an anonymous tip left to the state police investigation division, totally different department than licensing, that the officers at my site, me in particular, were involved with the local gang dealing drugs and all sorts of other illicit activity, etc. So we had an undercover officer from the state police work my site for 3 months as an officer there. Again, I was totally in the dark about this for obvious reasons, and while Andy knew about it, he also knew that it was nonsense. So he actively helped to put the undercover into play to prove us innocent. Nothing came of it, and all I knew was that I had a new guy I had to show the ropes to, and he turned out to be a hell of a good worker. He even helped us bust the guy behind the cat house operation that one of the maintenance workers was running out of empty apartments, employing ladies of the night. We had known it was going on, sort of, rumors and such, but not who or where, you know? There is a happy ending to this, as the dear husband was retired from the city attorney's office while the ink was still drying on the settlement agreement my company got with the city. As for the entitled woman, she got better, thank goodness. The misdemeanor assault charges that were filed against her for poking Betsy and the 3 other officers at the jail that she went to as they tried to book her were all dropped, as she got the court-mandated psych help she really needed. Apparently, she had divorced the husband for the long-term psychological torment that she suffered at his hands and took him for every dime he had, all the way down to his shorts. She did end up apologizing to the owner of the store, Greg, but not to me. But by the time all of that took place, I wasn't working at that company anymore. I was happily retired and she couldn't find me. She also talked to Sergeant Betsy about the ordeal, and that's where I found out about a lot of this after I contacted Betsy. I could not believe the can of worms this random encounter opened up and how much I completely missed about the aftermath. On the plus side, this gave me a chance to see some old friends I've missed, and I even got a job offer out of it. Something a whole lot less strenuous than the complex from hell that I worked at back then. So, was I the jerk for how I handled this? Yeah, so apparently poking a police officer like that with your fingers can be considered assaulting a police officer. I think touching them in general might be considered assaulting a police officer. But the one thing that not enough people seem to be pointing out is that the police officer picked her up and slammed her on her head, and then they say that she was in serious need of immediate medical attention for her mental health. Even if she was already a certain way before, getting slammed like that probably doesn't help the situation at all. I'm guessing the officer felt like she had no other options since she was just going totally wild. That part of the story sounds like it's straight out of pro wrestling. Officer Betsy at that point had picked her up, flipped her over, dropped the entitled woman on her head, landed on top of her, handcuffed her, got her up, opened the door, slid her in the patrol car, and slammed it on her. The way that that's described sounds so extreme. So many of these situations seem to originally start when somebody thinks that somebody else works at a place that they do not work at. This guy did not work for this store, but no matter how many times they told her that, she didn't want to hear it. For some reason, that concept seems so unbelievable to people in these situations when you keep telling them over and over again, I truly do not work here. Seriously, I don't work here. But then they keep screaming that they're going to get you fired. The original poster actually ended up having some empathy for this woman because once he hears about her having to be in the psych ward, he can understand how terrible of a situation that is. But I mean, what do you really do in a situation like that when you're trying to help the person by telling them the facts, the reality that you don't work there, and then they just keep going and going and going? There's not really anything you can do sometimes. This is more like one of those circumstances where life just happened to the OP, the original poster. Not necessarily something that he was antagonizing or trying to bring out. I mean, he even left, and then when he went outside, she was out there waiting for him. But the last thing I'll say on this one is what a ripple effect. This one single event cascaded down into all of these different outcomes happening. A lot of the times we don't get to see what happens as a result of a certain thing going down, but in this case, we saw a lot of it. So if you were in this situation, let me know how you would handle it down below. And also, jerk or not a jerk, and why. My entitled mother-in-law threw my family heirloom engagement ring down a storm drain. Then she said my niece was so ugly that she will never allow her son to have children with me for fear of having her grandkids be that ugly. She accused me of trying to convert her son to Christianity, came into my house, destroyed my Christmas tree with precious family memories on them, and then all All hell broke loose. Police were involved, I got bit and pregnant. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I've seen a lot of crazy people in my life, but my potential future mother-in-law is the absolute worst person I have ever met. I'm a 30-year-old female and I've been with my boyfriend who's 31 for 8 months now. For the first few months, everything was amazing. He is the sweetest and most caring man I've ever been with. He likes to surprise me with fun dates and flowers for no apparent reason. The biggest surprise of all, though, was when I met his mother. I met his parents for the first time a few months ago, and the first thing my future mother-in-law said to me when I walked in the door was,
"Are you Jewish?"
I am not, and I am not particularly religious, but I was raised Catholic. Once I told her this, it was the beginning of the madness. She immediately stopped talking to me and acted as if I didn't exist. I was extremely nervous about meeting my boyfriend's parents, so this broke my heart. I was determined to make a good impression, so I just kept trying to connect with her. This was a huge mistake, and I should have just let it go. Once we were all seated for dinner, she finally decided to try and make conversation. I have naturally red hair, and she asked me if my parents have the same color. I told her I have the same hair as my mother. She then had the audacity to ask me,
"Do the carpets match the drapes?"
I had no idea how to respond. I just sat there stunned. Seeing my reaction, she said,
"Don't worry, I'll ask my son about it later."
I looked over at my boyfriend, who seemed equally as shocked as I was, but he didn't say anything. She then started to go on about my hair being too curly. She told me that I really needed to learn how to run a brush through my hair and think about my appearance more when I'm out with her son. Then, when I didn't eat much at dinner, she gave me her version of a compliment. I was told that it was good that I am watching what I eat because it would be a shame if I got any bigger. This was just my first meeting with this woman. As soon as I got into my car, I burst into tears until I got home. My boyfriend was texting me and apologizing for his mother's behavior, but the damage was done. I told him I needed time to think. He went into apology overload after this and started sending flowers to my office every day and leaving me messages begging me to talk to him. I finally agreed and we went out to dinner. He told me that he spoke with his mother about her inappropriate comments and he swore it would never happen again. With this reassurance, I decided to give it another chance. Fast forward 2 weeks to when he invited me to come to a family birthday party. This time I would also be meeting his sisters and his grandparents. His grandparents and sisters are awesome people. They asked me normal questions about my job, family, and friends. His mother seemed to be avoiding me throughout the evening, and honestly, I was okay with that. I went to grab something from my purse and I noticed that it was not where I left it. I looked everywhere, but I could not find it. I went and asked my boyfriend and he began to help me look. He then got a strange look on his face and he quickly went upstairs. I could then hear a lot of yelling begin upstairs. He came back down holding my purse after a few minutes and told me that we were leaving. Once we got in the car, I asked him what was going on. His mother had taken my purse so that she could see my driver's license. She intended to try and run a background check on me. He told me that she had told him this earlier, but honestly, he thought she was joking. I thought that it was best if I avoided any of his family functions for the time being. This worked out great for a while and he went to any of his family parties alone. He would ask me each time before leaving if I was sure that I didn't want to go, but I always declined. Last week, his family had their family reunion and he asked me to please come with him. I was very reluctant, but considering there would be so many people present, I didn't think she would pull anything. When we got there, everything was going great. I met his extended family, I got to catch up with his sisters. His mother did seem to be shooting me death glares all night, but I brushed it off. Soon she came over and joined a table that I was seated at with his sisters and some cousins. The conversation was pleasant as we were talking about his sister's children. His sister has a daughter who is 12 and is the same age as my niece. I then showed his sister a picture of my niece on my phone. His mother took a look at the screen and began to laugh. She told me she hopes that if me and her son ever have children, that they don't look like my niece. My niece is beautiful, by the way, and she is only 12 years old. What kind of monster attacks a 12-year-old child's appearance? This was my breaking point, and I went off like a volcano. I started to scream at her and told her that she is the most evil person I have ever had the disadvantage to meet. I told her if I ever did have children with her son, she can be certain she'll never meet them because hell is too far to travel to. I am not 100% certain exactly everything that I said, but from what his younger sister later said, it was epic. She began to play the victim victim and wail that I had just misunderstood her joke. My boyfriend came rushing over at this point and she threw herself into his arms, telling him I am a horrible woman and he needed to throw me right out. He told her that wasn't gonna happen and to stop making a fool of herself. She seemed to accept this for a moment and sat back down. She just kept sobbing that I just didn't understand how to take a joke. Then something in her snapped as she noticed something that my boyfriend was holding in his hand and began to have another meltdown. I didn't understand what was happening at this point, and I just stood there watching a grown woman pitch a fit like a toddler. None of what she was saying made any sense to me, as it was mostly just incoherent screaming, but I did pick up on many derogatory comments directed my way. My boyfriend then told me we were leaving and told me to grab my things. As I started to get ready, my future mother-in-law made a lunge for my boyfriend's hand and grabbed the small box he was holding. She then looked me dead in the eyes and said,
"You will never have this ring, you little bee!"
She ran outside and threw the box down a storm drain. It turns out that my boyfriend was intending on proposing to me. He had just obtained his grandmother's ring while we were at the reunion. His grandmother is completely heartbroken because now her ring is down a storm drain instead of continuing on in the family as she had always wanted. I don't know where to go from here. I am devastated, confused, and exhausted. Can I ask him to never see his mother again? Is that my place to say something like that? I'm sorry that this story is so long, but I just really needed to get this rant off my chest. Jumping into the future, there is an update. I've been getting a lot of messages asking for an update on the ring situation. Unfortunately, the ring could not be found. The city came out to try and assist, but they could never uncover anything. My fiance and his family were devastated by this, and many of them have ceased communication with my future mother-in-law because of it. This ring had high significance in the family, more than I understood at the time of writing my first post. This was the straw that broke the camel's back for many of the family members. His sisters have chosen to keep contact with my future mother-in-law, and one of them has told me that she is playing the victim card, that she is saying she had a mental break and that we all need to be more compassionate and understanding of her. I call this total crap, and I know she knew exactly what she was doing when she threw the ring down the storm drain. I have a theory that the ring never went down the drain to begin with. I think maybe she hid the ring somewhere on herself and threw the box down the drain. I have no way to prove this, but I have expressed this concern to my fiance and his family. It's a rather large house though, and it could be hidden anywhere. I don't think the ring will be found anytime soon if this is what happened. On a happier note, I am now engaged to my fiance. My engagement ring does not have the same sentimental value as the other ring, but I love my new ring just the same. I am very happy to be engaged, and I cannot wait to spend the rest of my life with my fiance. My fiance is on low contact now with his mother, but word has reached her that we are engaged. After she found out, she apparently refused to leave her room for 3 days. She refused to speak to anyone or eat any food. The drama of this woman is unbelievable to me. Soon after, I was told about her condition. I started receiving a lot of strange emails and phone calls. I started getting phone calls from strange men asking me to perform a variety of adult things for them. Obviously, I was mortified by this and immediately changed my phone number. I told my fiance what had happened, and he thinks that someone must be giving out my number to men they meet by mistake. I didn't believe that, so I did a Google search of my phone number and found a few Craigslist ads written about me. The descriptions are just too similar to my appearance. They even mention my red hair. I truly believe this is my future mother-in-law doing this, making these fake Craigslist ads to tell men that I'm interested in doing this with them. She knows how to post on Craigslist as she sells a lot of used things online. I have also mysteriously been signed up for a variety of different dating sites and adult sites. If this is future mother-in-law, then I just don't know when she's gonna stop. This is a low level to drop to, and I cannot believe how pitiful this woman is. I showed all of this to my fiance and told him about my suspicions. He doesn't think it's his mother-in-law because he doesn't think she's tech savvy enough to be able to pull this off. Then what he said next chilled me to my bone, as I thought that his older sister liked me. He said that his older sister had mentioned that to maintain a healthy relationship, you should be checking your partner's phone daily. She proceeded to tell him that there should be no secrets and I shouldn't have a problem showing him my phone when he got home. I was gonna ask his sister to be in my bridal party, and now I don't even know where I stand with them. Do they hate me too? What did I do to deserve this? I truly don't know who I can trust anymore. I have decided to limit what I tell them going forward, as I currently think they are all future mother-in-law's spies. For now, I'm going to try and enjoy my engagement and put all of this out of my head. I guess I will just wait and see what happens with his family. Fast forwarding into the future, there is another update. I've been getting messages asking for an update on my situation with my future mother-in-law, so I thought I'd make a quick post on what happened most recently. My fiance went no contact with her after everything that happened. That lasted all about a week before she showed up banging at our door. My fiance was at work and I was alone at home at the time. She was wailing that she was sorry and that she just wanted to see me to apologize. Since I have neighbors who were beginning to watch this spectacle, I let her inside to talk. At first, she was very apologetic and said that she just wants to have a fresh start. She was pretty convincing, and I was actually considering just letting it all go. That's when she saw my Christmas tree and all hell broke loose yet again. She began to scream that I was trying to convert her son to Christianity and that I was just a little hoochie mama who was trying to ruin her family. I kindly asked her to please leave and that she was not welcome here, but she was not budging. She told me that no son of hers would ever celebrate Christmas, and then she proceeded to run towards the tree. She began tearing off every ornament and throwing them, leaving them smashed on the floor. I have many childhood and family ornaments on my tree that are very precious to me. Several were smashed in her rampage. I had to grab her and physically drag her away. This ended with her punching me several times and biting my hand. I was finally able to throw her out the front door and I grabbed my phone to call the police. She proceeded to scream like a banshee out front and call me every name in the book. The police arrived soon after, and just like that, she completely stopped her fit and began to try and play the victim. She told the police that I was an intruder in her son's apartment and that I had attacked her. The police had arrived with an ambulance, which she was promptly taken to because she was feeling faint and was in distress after my brutal assault on her. The police then came to interview me and I told them what actually happened. I showed them the bite mark on my hand and the bruises that were beginning to form. My fiance arrived at the scene and immediately came to my side. He confirmed to the officers that I do live here and that his mother is a nutcase. Seeing that her son was siding with me sent her into yet another tantrum. The police asked me if I would like to place charges against my future mother-in-law. I looked to my fiance and I could tell that he was conflicted on what to do. I had to do what would make me feel safe in the end, and I decided to place charges. My future mother-in-law was first taken to the hospital and then arrested upon her release. She is now facing charges for assault, and I have taken a restraining order against her. This has placed a serious strain on my relationship with my fiance. He and the rest of my family want me to drop the charges against his mother. He tells me that since I have a restraining order, she can no longer come near me, so I have nothing to worry about. I don't think he fully understands how terrifying this experience was for me. He tells me that it is my decision in the end and he will stand by me, but he doesn't want to see his mother go to prison. Part of me just wants to pack my bags and run. I told him I felt this way and he is begging me to stay with him. He says that we can move and have no contact with his family in the future. I am so very confused and conflicted on what to do. What should I do? And that brings us to the final update. Well, everyone, I know I will be trashed for being so stupid, but many of you have asked for an update. I left my fiance after everything that happened, and I was heartbroken. A few days after leaving and staying with my parents, I found out the news. I am pregnant. I came to the apartment to tell him the news and his mother was there. Yep, he decided to side with her. She screamed the loudest banshee scream I have ever heard. She told me I need to get a termination immediately. I told her that I would not do that. I plan to keep the baby. That is when when this monster attacked me. She started to hit me in my stomach area. After this, I called the police. That jerk did nothing to help, only said, "Stop," to her from the sidelines. I think he wanted the baby to die. Luckily, they are doing just fine. I truly regret dropping the restraining order. I now don't know what to do. I think he still has rights as a father, but I don't know how to fix it since they don't. But I don't know how to fix it so they don't have access. I am now pregnant and alone, living in my parents' house. Any advice is appreciated. Please leave out negative comments. I am not sure that I can handle them. I've been asked many times about what happened after. When I got home that day, my mother took one look at me and was furious. I had a black eye and bruises. I declined the ambulance and went straight to my parents' house. My mom led me to my bed and made me a cup of tea. Then she just kept asking, "Who did this?" She thought it was my ex, but when I told her the truth, she was even more furious. I explained everything that had happened. I never told her before, and all of the gory details. She calmed me down and left me to go make me some food, but she actually left the house. A few hours later, she came back. She had what she called her trophy, which is actually a large clump of my ex-mother-in-law's hair. She actually put that hair in a memory box. She told her that she will never lay eyes on her grandbaby and many other colorful things. My mom is actually an ex-bodybuilder and very into fitness. After that, I got a call from my ex and he just screamed at me. My mom took the call and told him to never contact me again or he will get the same treatment that was given to me. He has not contacted me since. So, what should I do? This story was way more wild than I had expected. Did this whole thing just come down to religion? That she didn't want her son to be with somebody from a different religion? Because that's the only reasoning I could really read into here. The very first question she asked before anything is about her religion. And then when she realizes that she's not in the same religion, then everything just completely explodes. And maybe I wouldn't think that's the only reason, but when the whole situation happens where she goes over and sees the Christmas tree and just loses her mind because she thinks that she's trying to convert her son to Christianity, I mean, that's got to be the reason. What else could it possibly be? That's the only thing they really reference here. But why wouldn't the son have mentioned that to his mom before if he knew how important that was to her? Or maybe he did and she just didn't believe it or didn't really think it was real, kind of the same way that the fiance made the assurances that the mother would never act like this again, and then she ended up stealing her ID straight out of her purse after making this vow to not act the same way. I guess technically she didn't act the same way. She secretly and stealthily went into her purse, stole the ID and the entire purse itself, I guess. But this sounds like a lifetime of misery. Now that she's pregnant, she's gonna keep the baby, so she's gonna be always attached to this mother-in-law, or I guess since they're not getting married now, baby's grandma, forever. The entire time she was describing her fiance, she kind of made it seem like he was somewhat neutral but mostly on her side, but she basically describes him as a coward at the end because when all that went down, when she got attacked, he didn't do anything. I guess because he felt no loyalty to her anymore because they weren't together anymore. But still, why would you not step in a moment like that where things have physically escalated? Honestly, this is a difficult situation because how do you really handle this whole thing? She's making it sound like, yeah, maybe he has parental rights. Of course he does. I mean, he's the dad. Regardless if they're married or not, he still has parental rights. So I don't think it's as easy as just move away to a different city or something. The exact line the original poster says this is where she says, "I think he still has rights as a father, but I don't know how to fix it so they don't have access." I don't think there's anything you can fix there unless you get full custody, right? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong down below, but I don't think so. She might be able to get the mother-in-law away from the baby forever, at least legally, because that sounds like attempted murder because she was trying to punch her in the stomach when she found out the original poster was pregnant. And the sad part is that the original poster says that she thinks the reason the ex didn't help her out in the situation is because he wants the baby to die. I mean, geez, this is awful. And those people are going to be attached to you for all time. So now knowing everything that you know, what advice would you give to the original poster here? Where would you even begin? Let me know down below. Professor Karen makes our life miserable, takes advantage of her power at this school, and ultimately embezzles funds from a student group, cooks the books, and signs the money over to herself. All at the same time that she's treating everyone around her like garbage. Here's how we found out and what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. My husband works for a pretty prestigious university as the director of student life. He oversees a decent sized staff and and their work encompasses all manner of student activities, groups, Greek life, etc. A little background before I get into the incident. A few months ago, we were expecting our baby. Most people on campus knew this and knew that my husband, let's call him Joe, would be taking paternity leave. When the big day came, I called him at work and told him it's go time. Meet me at the hospital, and he dropped everything and ran out the door as you do. In the delivery room, we had plenty of downtime, so from time to time, he checked his work email while I rest. He's looking through it and goes, "What the F?" A professor wrote him the most caustic, unhinged rant saying basically, "I came to your office to see you about a matter concerning my students, and you weren't there despite the department hours clearly stating between 8 and 5 p.m. This is unacceptable and unprofessional. Contact me immediately," etc., etc. He laughed and said, "Won't she feel silly when she gets his out of office reply?" But no, 10 minutes later, she's harassing him again. Finally, he sent her a very terse reply, and it seemed that that was the end of that. But not for long. Every day for the next week, this professor came into the office demanding to know if Joe was there. More than one tear was shed by the staff during this time. I don't know exactly what she was saying or why no one else could do whatever she needed. The staff was kind enough not to burden Joe with this while he was on his paternity leave, but reports are that it was like having an angry Dementor come through. On the first day Joe returned to work, he got to meet this professor face to face. He was in his office on FaceTime with me actually, when yelling erupts from the hall. "Uh-oh," he says to me. I bet that's her. We hung up, and what conversation happened in that office can only be imagined. Or maybe he told me and I forgot. #newborn life. But by all accounts, she was cantankerous, irate, and incorrect in what she was trying to do and could not be told otherwise. As he is in charge of the department, but not of her, he could only put his foot down on the request, but not the behavior. Finally, she left, and the whole situation was done and dusted, finished and forgotten, but again, not for long. Fast forward to yesterday, I decided to pop in with the baby to surprise him and hope we could go for lunch. Also, to show off the baby, of course. When we arrived, it was squeals all around from the office staff, and one of the ladies took the baby for a tour around the building. I've been holding that kid for 3 months straight, so I was happy to let her. Joe's admin assistant told me he was in a meeting for another 10 minutes or so. And then she went off on the baby world tour, so I decided to sit in his office and enjoy merciful silence. But you guessed it, not for long. Enter the professor from hell. I knew it was her before she said one word. She looked like an ivory tower Karen with an "I want to talk to your dean" hairdo. Professor Karen said,
"Does nobody work around here? This is outrageous! Where is the administrative assistant? Why is Joe even on the payroll if he's never here? Go find him!"
I said, "What?" And Professor Karen said,
"OMFG, are you too hungover to accept a simple direction? WTF is wrong with you? I'd kick your butt out of class looking like that. I don't care where he is. Go and get Joe!"
"Oh, you think I'm a student?"
"Oh, I'm gonna pretend I'm not a student now, sitting in the office with the university sweatshirt and book bag. What group are you in? Because Joe will be very interested to hear how inept you are."
I'm like, "Book bag? Oh yeah, diaper bag." At this point, I decide to write this out and hope he comes back to see it in progress. But what I say is, okay, let's say I'm a student. Why do you think I work here? That was exactly the wrong, or right, depending on your point of view, thing to say. This lady came undone in a torrent of maniacal hissing and shrieking. Her vitriol knew no bounds as she directed me, the office staff, my husband, all students except hers, the building itself. I have never seen such a tantrum. As she's having her meltdown, I moved out of the chair where I'd been sitting and moved over to where a photo of our wedding that Joe hung up was. I leaned against the wall like a cowboy with my foot up, arms folded, smirking. Unsurprisingly, she didn't notice the similarities between the beaming bride and the dumpy, sleep-deprived chick standing before her, but I remained committed to the con. After several moments of a non-stop torrent of verbal abuse,
"Joe is not even fit for a community college. How the F did he get a job here?"
that was the one that made me chortle. She didn't like that very much. I hear a flurry of footsteps come flying down the hall. The admin assistant comes sliding through the door like Kramer, face white as a sheet. I ask her if Joe Jr. is okay. Another coworker had him in another office, office because they heard Professor Karen and didn't want his baby to learn what madness lurks in this world at such a tender age. She has exactly enough time to answer yes before Professor Karen unleashes the Kraken in her direction. The ineptitude of moi clutches pearls.
Who the hell do you think you're talking to? I'm the administrative assistant.
Me, still posed like the Marlboro Man, points in my picture. And right on cue, here comes the man of the hour, Joe, complete with Joe Jr. in arm. The co-worker holding the baby had called his cell phone and told him what was happening and to get back here ASAP. Joe was livid, but that eerie, scary sort that is a schadenfreude's lover's delight when directed at a deserving recipient. He handed me the baby and asked me if I was alright, and then turned to the Professor Karen. First, Joe looked at the baby and said, "You're alright, boy." Then turned to Professor Karen and said, "Get out, and don't you come back till I've spoken to your department chair. I'm going to lunch." I told him, "Boy, do I have a story to tell you." And out the door we swept off to lunch, where we got pizza and migraines from laughing so hard. I don't know what action is being taken against Professor Karen, but if I find out, I will be sure to give testimony. Jumping into the future, there was an update. Okay, Joe talked to the head of the Department of Engineering, and it turns out Professor Karen is an associate professor from hell, and therefore untenured. Mwahahaha. Joe is leaving for a conference tomorrow and won't be back until Wednesday, so I probably won't know more until then. Stay tuned. There's another update. Administrative assistant is gathering a paper trail of literal papers that Professor Karen has submitted that she isn't allowed to, and checks she signed that she can't sign. She'll also be forwarding all of these harassing emails from Professor Karen and making a written statement of Professor Karen's behavior. Joe will probably send the emails he's received to HR and the department chair, but he's not as heated now on his own behalf, but still livid about the way that the staff is being treated there as he was the other day, and might not press too hard except in support of the staff. Jumping into the future again, there's another update. Not a very exciting update, but the administrative assistant has submitted her complaint to HR. Professor Karen's department chair suggested to her that she not contact Joe's department, not for the least of which reason the things she's trying to do can only be done by students, and she overtook their responsibility in an effort to mega ultra micromanage them. Cue the surprise that she treats her students like that and usurped control of a student-led group. In all likelihood, this process will drag on for some time, and she'll probably get a slap on the wrist for both offenses. That might seem like it's all done, but several months into the future, there is one last update. A few months ago, I told the tale of a nightmarish professor who, if I do say so myself, I showed up quite nicely. So many people have asked for an update, and at long last, I have one. That bee got censured and was asked to step down and out to another institution, jail, hell, wherever. When we last heard from Professor Karen, she was making the support staff and administrative assistants cry on a weekly basis. During these summer months, most of the students have been off campus, but that hasn't stopped Professor Karen from bringing the drama. I'll warn you now, I'm going to obscure some of these details to protect the parties involved, innocent or otherwise. Part of what Professor Karen did that started all this trouble in the first place was steamrolling the leaders of a student group she was mentoring, taking over their responsibilities, and being an absolute monster to everyone involved. She was told upteen times that the group's treasury was solely a responsibility of the students, and yet refused to let them so much as play a part. Long story short, even though she's given Joe a wide berth, she continues to be terrible to everyone else in the department. He could not let this go on and began a two-pronged approach to flush her out. In addition to working with HR and providing them weekly examples of her awfulness, he also asked the employee who works with the incoming and outgoing checks from and to student groups to dig deep. Sure enough, jackpot, eureka. Professor Karen was signing the checks, she can't, submitting the checks, she can't, hence the fights with the office staff, taking over the funds from the group once received, cooking the books, and skimming off the top. In the same week, Joe received word from HR that action would be taken and learned about the straight up fraud, which probably caused Professor Karen to be an extra prickly pear. He received a call from the chair of Professor Karen's college. The guy was halfway around the world on vacation, but he was so disgusted by all of this that he actually spoke to Joe to discuss matters. I like to think he was sitting on top of an elephant or drinking a Singapore hardcore sling while making this call. Professor Karen's horrendous actions now brought to light, she was presented with a choice of police involvement or resignation. The last I heard, she hasn't made an official reply. Now, if it were up to me, I'd have chucked Professor Karen in the slammer and thrown away the key. But the powers that be don't live for messy drama like I do, I guess. There you have it, friends. There is our exciting, if not slightly disappointing conclusion. So long, former Professor Karen. Good luck finding a job in any school anywhere now. So if Professor Karen's scheme this entire time was to steal the money from the student group, why would she be drawing attention to herself like this? If she was really trying to get away with it and she really wanted the money from this whole group to cook the books and keep it all for herself, wouldn't you think she would just lay low and not try and draw attention by screaming at random people in the actual building? The same building where she's pulling this whole scam off? Depending on how much money was stolen, she could be in some serious trouble. She might actually go to jail for this. I mean, if you're signing checks that are not meant for you and you're putting your name on them and they're actually getting cashed out, that's bad. But if you're signing somebody else's name that the checks are made out to, that's also bad. Maybe even worse, because in that case, you're actually forging someone's signature. Out of curiosity, I looked up to see how serious it is to forge someone's signature, and the first result says, in most circumstances, forgery is a felony. Courts may sentence people found guilty of forgery to pay a fine or restitution to serve prison time. It also says the punishment for forging a signature is up to 15 years if it's used for identity theft, immigration documents, or military discharge papers. But in other situations, like this situation where you put your signature on a check, it's subject to state law. Probably the most funny part of this entire thing is the fact that the original poster just stood in front of the wedding picture side by side with her in real life and her in the picture, and the professor had no clue that they were the same person at all, or maybe didn't even look. So anyway, let me know what you think. Was the punishment for the professor way too harsh or just right? And if you were in this situation, how would you have handled it? Let me know down below. Am I the jerk for wanting to change my feminine name? I'm a 21-year-old male and I have a feminine name and I want to change it. My family is furious. Shortly before I was born, my mother's sister passed away in an accident. My parents agreed to name me after her to honor her memory, and hence I was given what I feel is a female name despite my family's insistence that it's a unisex name. Maybe it is technically, but I have always resented my name. I realize it sounds very much like a first world problem, but it has caused me a lot of grief in my life. Kids in school would always tease me for it. Whenever I have to give my name for something, people always double take or ask if I'm being serious. I deleted Tinder off my phone purely because of the nonsense I cop from girls about my name. I work in a school and even kids half my age tease me every day when they read my name badge. I could go on. I finally came to the decision that I want to change my name. The worst decision I ever made was talking to my parents for advice. They both lost their minds on me, but particularly my mother, that I would even consider it. I was labeled as ungrateful, disrespectful to them, and even more disrespectful to my aunts. My parents told my sister about my decision, who also flipped out and has continually told me how disappointed she was. My family has pretty much threatened to cut me out of their lives completely if I go through with this, which I don't really want to happen. Aside from this issue, I love my parents and getting to see them. I get on great with my sister and her husband, as well as their new baby who I love. I also only have a small circle of friends who are busy with their own lives, and I'm single. So if I lose all contact with my family, then I feel like I'll be totally isolated. I'm just not sure what I should do. I consider trying to change it secretly, but if my parents found out, and they will, then I am screwed. Part of me thinks I need to just suck it up and deal with it, but I hate my name so much at this point, I really don't want to do that. I'm at a loss for how to deal with this. What should I do? 4 months later, there was an update. It's been a little while since I posted this, and I wanted to finally be able to give an update. A fair bit has happened since then. To cut right to the chase, I legally changed my name to Sabe, pronounced like Abe, but with an S. The process was pretty straightforward. 4 weeks and $204 later, and I got my certificate in the mail. My original post got a fair bit of attention, and I received some fantastic advice about how to go about this, how to talk to my family, and how to make some compromises, and honestly, I am fine with how things went down. I ended making a final emotional plea to my parents to accept my decision. I made it clear how I felt about everything and how regardless of what they said, I was going to do it anyway. I made an offer to them that nothing would change, and it would be purely for my own peace of mind and mental health, and to my shock, they finally agreed. I am still Sabrina, and Dad actually seems seems to be making an effort to try and call me Sabe. He often has to correct himself. My sister seems disappointed in my decision, but has come to respect it. I will always be Sabrina to her, and I am fine with letting her continue to call me that. With all that said, I'm fine with still going by that name for my parents and my sister. That's how I grew up, so I'm used to it. And it's a little reminder of the old me. Even though I hated how it affected my personal life, it was still my name. For everything else, I am Sabe, and it feels like a huge weight off my shoulders. The day I got my new badge at work honestly felt like one of the most powerful moments of my entire life, even though it's a pretty minor thing. Overall, I am very happy with my decision. So, was I the jerk? Ultimately, the parents came around, but how can you expect someone else, even if it's your kids, to live with a name that they really cannot stand, especially because it causes them all sorts of problems in their life? It's not just because the original poster didn't like the name, it's because that name made life a lot harder for him. So the parents can't truly understand or relate to what he's going through. I mean, he had to get to the point where he's making a desperate plea to the parents. Not that it's their choice anyway, but even after all that, the sister still seems a little bit disappointed that he did it after all. I definitely get wanting to honor someone's memory, but this is you forcing someone else to honor their memory. So in this case, it's the parents forcing the original poster to honor her memory by living day to day with that name. As a kid, even having a slightly weird name will get you made fun of pretty much constantly. And if you have one like the OP, where people are doing double takes and little kids are making fun of you, then it's probably not going to go away. It's one thing if you felt really connected to that name and you felt like it was you and it was your identity and that's what you want it to be, versus someone named you this and you're desperately trying to get out of it. But in the end, thankfully the original poster was able to change his name and didn't lose his family in the process. But let me know how you would handle this if this was your family and these were your set of parents down below. My mother-in-law kidnapped my baby. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. So a little backstory. My husband is an only child. His mom has always been very involved. We got along somewhat, but she has always sort of crossed some lines. She has a key to our house for emergency purposes only because she lives 4 blocks away. I had our daughter 4 weeks ago. She has been over at least 3 days every week since I've had her. She's always telling me what I am doing wrong and how she'd do things differently. The baby is up every 2 hours a night and she insists she'd sleep through the night if she could stay at grandma's. I told her that I'm not comfortable sending a breastfed baby away overnight at 4 weeks old. This last week, she kept pushing the issue no matter how many times I said no. Last night, we put the baby in her crib. We stopped room sharing because the baby was so loud that I could get no sleep whatsoever, so my husband has been getting her when it's time for her to feed. My husband fell asleep early and I dozed off. I woke up 4 hours later and started to panic because she hadn't made any noise. I was sure she had died of SIDS. I went into her room and she was gone. I froze and started screaming her name around the house like she would somehow pop out like it was all a joke. My husband woke up in a panic and just screamed, "What's going on?" over and over. I ran to my phone and I called 911 and I saw a picture message from my mother-in-law of my sleeping baby in her arms with the caption, "Sleep over, nam-nams." I was immediately enraged. I screamed so hard that I almost vomited. I called her and I saw red. I told her I was coming to get the baby right now and she would never see her again and to never contact our family again. My husband decided it was best if he went to get her. When he came back, he said his mother decided to let herself in and give us a break, that she was sure we'd hear the text and thought we'd be thanking her for a night of sleep. I do not give a care. I hate her. I cannot forgive her for this. My husband thinks I need to calm down, that we just need to get our key back. His lack of urgency about this situation makes me want to divorce him. We have never had any issues before this, but this feels like a deal breaker to me. I already had PPA, postpartum anxiety, and now it's through the roof. I don't feel safe in my own home with my own family. I hate my mother-in-law. I hate my husband. When I think about what happened, I sob uncontrollably. uncontrollably. I can't sleep now that I know I can't protect my baby when I sleep. I cannot believe I didn't wake up. I feel like the biggest piece of trash mother. If danger really came, I would have let my daughter down. Am I overreacting for wanting a divorce or for never wanting to see my mother-in-law again? My husband and my mother-in-law think that it's my hormones and that I have overreacted. Am I overreacting? I just need to talk about it with non-involved parties. I have no friends or family for hundreds of miles. Oh, and she also fed her formula while she had her, but that's the least of my worries. It still infuriates me because breastfeeding has been really hard for us. Jumping into the future, there's an update. I just wanted to give a quick update. I bawled reading all the responses because I finally felt like someone was on my side. I called my mom late last night and I got a hotel. I refused to tell my husband where I was going, but told him the baby and I would be safe. My mom is disgusted about what I've been through. She's getting on a plane today to come help me. This entire experience has pushed me to the point that I need therapy. So today, my first order of business is getting a therapist set up ASAP. I decided to go alone for a while, and when I'm ready, I will go with my husband to see if there's a chance to move past this. Right now, I still don't want to, but I also agree that I'm not in the place to make life-changing decisions. Either way, I can never move back into that house. I don't know what my plan is these next few days yet, but I'm just going to take it day by day for now. As for my mother-in-law, I'm going to go to the police today to find out how to get a restraining order. Her and my husband keep saying,
"But she was safe. She was never in danger."
I disagree. My mother-in-law is clearly not mentally capable to care for a child. Who knows what else she would do because she feels that she knows best. Fast forwarding into the future again, but this time 2 weeks, there was another update. These past 2 weeks have been crazy for me emotionally, but I saw the request for an update and wanted to let everyone know what was going on even though it's been generally uneventful. I got so many messages and comments with support that meant so much to me. So soon after I wrote that post, my mom had arrived to help me get through my anxiety and support me. By the time she was here, I was in a hotel and I had not slept. I was going way too long without sleeping, and I think the sleep deprivation was making me crazier. She came and sat with me while I slept. It was the most helpful thing anyone could have done for me. My husband asked to talk, so I agreed to meet with him. He apologized and said that he realized that I was right. His mom had severely crossed a line and that it was hard for him to accept that his mom did something so wrong. So in his head, he was telling himself it was not that bad and that if the baby wasn't hurt, then no harm was done. But he wasn't thinking about the hurt done to me and my feelings of security. He said he changed the locks on the home and would support whatever I wanted to do with his mom. He said that he was willing to cut off contact for a while, but asked that I not press charges. We left it at that for that time. I told him I'd think about what he said and keep in touch. Shortly after this whole thing happened, I got a lot of texts from his family supporting me and letting me know that they were so sorry about what happened and that no matter what, my baby and I are family and we have their support. That meant so much to me. People were finally backing me up and it gave me some peace of mind. A few days after seeing my husband, we met up again. He had a letter from his mother. I thought about just throwing it out, but I decided to read it. It was a very long-winded apology. It basically said that she is sick about what she did. She said that if someone did that to her when her husband and her were young, she'd want them to die. She is terrified about losing me as a daughter-in-law and her grandchild, but she is going to keep her distance. She asked me to reach out if and when I am ready. I still haven't reached out to her and I don't know if I will. I feel like her letter may be genuine, but I don't think I'll ever trust her again for obvious reasons. I feel like she sees it as an easier to ask for forgiveness than permission sort of thing. I'm in a hard place of trying to decide how to assert my authority as a mother without alienating my child from people who love them. I don't want my forgiveness to seem like weakness and in the end put my child in more situations like this. I've been getting help with all of this in therapy, which I've started twice a week. Right now, the general guidance I get from my therapist is don't make any big moves yet. Divorce, moving long distances, cutting people out, etc. So I'm taking it day by day. I make sure my husband sees our child every day. We don't talk about the state of our marriage yet. I told him when I was ready, we will talk. He's respected that, and it's made a huge difference in the people I hope I have for our future. So that's it, really. There weren't really any dramatic blow-ups or legal action. There are still a lot of unanswered questions for me, but this This time has been one filled with self-discovery and support from a lot of unexpected places, and I'm incredibly grateful. Was my mother-in-law the jerk? All of this could have been avoided if the mother-in-law just communicated that, hey, it looks like you guys are tired and you haven't slept in a long time. Do you want me to take the baby? And then she would have got her answer. The weirdest part is that she just came into their house in the middle of the night and just took the baby using the key that was supposed to be only for emergencies. That's a very weird thing to do if you haven't already established that that is what she's supposed to be doing, which obviously the OP had no idea that she was going to do that. It sounds like there's some implied information because the OP lightly touches on the whole concept of the mother giving the baby formula when the baby's supposed to have breast milk. And I don't know if that's because you're not supposed to switch them between formula and breast milk. I'm not sure, but if any of you guys are mothers out there, you can let me know what the impact of this is, if there is any at all. One of the top responses says, wow, that is just wow. I am absolutely incredibly happy that the husband and his family all realized the magnitude of this mess up and stood by the OP in the end. It gives me faith, if nothing else, that the OP is going to make decisions from a place of knowing that she is right and being supported versus a place of being attacked and living in constant fear that it might happen again because nobody will admit how messed up and wrong it was. The OP's mother-in-law messed up on such a massive scale I seriously can't imagine. And I do agree with the OP that it was more of a asking forgiveness than permission thing because number one, she had asked to take the baby on overnights repeatedly and been shut down, and number two, if the mother-in-law had zero awareness that what she was doing was so grievous, then why sneak in and take the baby? Why not come in, wake the dad and tell him what she's doing? Or why not come in, comfort the baby if the baby wakes up crying so that it goes back to sleep before mom and dad wake up, if that's possible? It just makes no sense at all that she truly didn't know what she did was grievously wrong. So what do you think? Was it a huge deal or not a big deal at all? Let me know what your thoughts are down below, and jerk or not a jerk, and why. Am I the jerk for getting my job back to get out of taking care of my husband's autistic niece? My husband, who's a 30-year-old, became the legal guardian to his sister's daughter, who's 17, 2 months ago. She lost her single mom last year. My in-laws took her in, but they were too old. That was when my husband became her legal guardian despite my concerns. He told me that he would take care of her completely. We got married a year ago after 15 years of dating. I had a very successful career in a very physically and mentally demanding field. I had to travel a lot. We wanted to start a family and I agreed to be a stay-at-home mom. I quit my job a few months into the marriage when I got pregnant. Sadly, I had a miscarriage. Then his sister died and everything is put on hold. In the meantime, I took a part-time job in a related field which allows remote work so that I am not bored out of my mind. My sister-in-law was a nurse. She quit her job to take care of her daughter full-time. Her daughter has a variety of issues including nonverbal autism, a series of developmental disorders like dyslexia, and severe sensory issues. My husband says that he does most of the work, but he doesn't. Since I'm working from home part-time, most of the caretaking falls to me. She gets angry and has meltdowns all the time. She doesn't like the food that I make, and most of the time she ends up throwing it on the floor or at me. I am at my wit's end, and it is just so emotionally exhausting. Around December 15th, my husband was working late and asked me to take care of dinner. She is very picky about food. The slightest change in texture or taste from what she is used to can cause a meltdown. She threw the plate at my feet and I ended up bleeding. At that point, I called my husband and asked him to come home ASAP. He said that he wouldn't be able to. I went up to my room and I told him I am not dealing with this anymore. He came home hours later and she was still crying. He was absolutely furious at me. He called me heartless and irresponsible. I told him I have had enough of both of their ungrateful behavior, and I told him that I'm going to my mom's and I wouldn't be back until New Year's. He panicked and tried to apologize, but I left. He called me every day asking me to come back. I finally came back and he told me that my stunt had forced him to use all of his available leaves to stay home with her. He told me that he was glad I was back. I told him that I contacted my former company and got my old job back and it starts Monday. It's an in-office job and requires travel. He asked me who was supposed to stay at home as she cannot be left alone. He has no more leaves and full-time caretakers are too expensive. I told him he promised to take care of everything when he became her guardian and that it was his problem. As you can guess, my family supports me and his family thinks I am being extremely selfish. So I am asking judgment from impartial strangers. Am I the jerk in this situation? Jumping into the future, there actually is an update. Lots of people were messaging me for an update, so here goes. I wish I could say things got got better. My husband took a few days off to interview special needs nannies/caretakers. He ended up finding a good and experienced person to take on the job. He hired her for 9 to 6 during weekdays. One day, she ended up saying she cannot make it for a couple of days due to an emergency. My husband had a meeting that he couldn't miss and asked me to look after his niece for the day. I refused, and he took my car keys while I was getting ready and left before I noticed so that I could not go to work. I grew up with a narcissistic, gaslighting father who did stuff like this all the time. I told him to come back in 1 hour or I will call CPS, and once they get there, I will call a cab and get to work. He ended up driving back, and this turned into a big fight, and I told him that if he does it again, I will walk out and never look back. He apologized and said that he was just desperate. The worst happened 2 weeks ago. I needed to travel for a couple of weeks for work, and I could not find my passport. I am a very organized person, and I knew that I did not misplace it. I ended up calling the non-emergency helpline. They ransacked the house and found the passports hidden in his gym bag. It is a crime to steal passports, and they asked me if I wanted to press charges. I said no. Another fight. He told me that he needed me at home that weekend due to a social welfare visit, and he knew that I would not stay even if he had asked me. I kicked them both out of my house, and I told him I would call the police if he came near me again. My house is a premarital asset. Thank God for that. I told him I would be filing for divorce. The welfare visit fell apart as neither of them were living there when the worker showed up, and the social worker also knew about the recent call to the non-emergency helpline. So, all in all, she was not impressed with our BS. He came by 2 days ago. He told me that he ended up moving in with his parents. They own and live in a small 2-bedroom apartment that doesn't qualify according to welfare norms. He ended up asking me for another chance. He asked if I would consider letting him and niece stay until they figure it out, or she would have to go to the state's care. He told me that there is no way he can afford rent and a carer and begged me. I told him that I could never forgive what he did. He knew about my past with my father and still went ahead and did it. He suggested they could move in and we can work on this at couples counseling. I told him that I could never trust him again and that it was over. He asked me if he could get his parents to take her in or even relinquish her care to the state if I would give him another chance. I think months worth of anger burst that day. I told him that even though it may appear as if the problem between us is the niece, it was actually him. He didn't ask me before taking her in. He did nothing to help. He waved my concerns away whenever I felt burnt out. He took on a responsibility without consulting me and dumped everything on me. He chose to take my keys. He chose to hide my passport. I told him things may have been different. Him, niece, and I may have adapted and become a family if he hadn't made the wrong choice at my expense at every turn. I told him to get out of my house. It was over and I never wanted to see any of them ever again. I still don't know if what I'm doing is right or wrong. I know people wanted some sort of happy ending, but it is what it is. I still have not started the divorce proceedings yet, but I will soon. For now, I am taking a break as it has been a very emotional and draining couple of weeks. So with everything that you know, am I the jerk? This is a really difficult situation that I can actually feel for people from both sides. And beyond that, it seems like a lot of people change their opinions from the first half to the second half, meaning the original story, a lot of people seem to think either jerk or not a jerk, and then on the second half in the update, a lot of people flipped. Sometimes on both sides they flipped. So because of that, in this one, you can actually answer if you thought she was the jerk for part 1 and for part 2, and then overall. One of the lines that was pointed out was, if he hadn't made the wrong choice at my expense at every turn. I think that line really is the distinction between the niece not being the problem herself, but more so the husband and his lack of regard for what the wife would have to go through in order to make this happen. I know from his perspective, he would probably say that he had no choice. What else could he do? He doesn't make enough money to pay for a carer, and his sister died and left the niece. What else are you supposed to do besides take them in? That's probably exactly how he would see it. I think the big disconnect, though, is that he didn't form a plan or talk this out with the OP, the wife, at all, it sounds like. He just assumed that she was going to totally revamp her life and restructure it around taking care of his niece without really even asking her or talking to her about it. And that's not some small undertaking. This is a full-time thing that you would otherwise have to hire a full-time employee 40 hours a week to take care of her. The husband suggesting that once and for all he will relinquish her to the state late so that maybe the wife could take him back really does show that he didn't understand the core issue this entire time. It wasn't the niece, like she said, it was how he went about this. Because replace the niece with any other difficult situation, whether it's a situation with a person like the niece was here, or it's a situation that is something totally different. You want to be able to count on your partner to be on the same page as you and not just leave everything to you, because that's how the OP sees it. But maybe you see it a totally different way. So let me know down below what you would do if you were in this situation, and jerk or not a jerk for each part down below. I pulled some flowers out of my yard and Karen went berserk. She claims that they are her flowers and got so spiteful that she ended up trying to burn my house down. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. Because the groundhog had no shadow, spring came early, so I had decided to weed the garden strip that borders mine and Karen's property. There's a fence between the garden and her house. While doing so, I got rid of some of my daylilies that are on my property. I finish, return to my house, and continue my day until I hear a shriek from the side of my house. I rush over because I'm scared someone got hurt, and Karen, who just got home from work, asks me why I got rid of her lilies. I said that they were my lilies and that I was making space for tomatoes, cucumbers, and carrots. She then calls the police because I had destroyed her property. The police come and basically tell her to go inside and shut up because it's pretty clear whose flowers they were. Skipping forward into the future, there was an update. Karen gets sloshed and lights my neighbor's house on fire because I gardened my own garden. This is an update to a previous post of mine, but I feel like this is big enough to warrant its own post. In my previous post, I explained that a woman flipped out over the fact that I had taken daylilies out of my garden in preparation for some vegetables and such that I was going to plant. In the comments, some had suggested that I put a camera facing the garden in case Karen decides that the tomatoes look like they're on her side of the property line. My aunt, who's not entitled, was switching from Arlo to Ring Home Security, so she sent me those. They arrived the morning of the fire, so no video. That aside, I did not expect Karen to do this. Yesterday, Karen got mega sloshed. She downed multiple cases. I don't know what she was drinking, but obviously she had a lot. And this put her anger over the edge about the loss of my lilies. She went with wood and fire starter to my neighbor's house, the one on the opposite side of her house than mine, and lit their bins on fire. The trash bins were engulfed in flames. This spread to their porch and their entire home was alight. I'm a light sleeper, and living in a cul-de-sac was woken up by the orange haze floating through my windows. I called 911, the whole shebang, witness report and everything. As I went out with the 911 operator on the phone, she gives a confession. After a while, as the fire department shows up, she realizes her mistakes. Number one, she lit a house on fire, and number two, she lit the wrong house on fire. She's being charged with arson and the like, and everyone got out. There's a mother, father, and 2 kids who are high schoolers that live there. It all feels surreal. That is some seriously extreme retaliation. And yes, she was trying to light the OP's house on fire. The OP clarifies this in a comment where somebody asked, did she mean to set your house on fire, and was so sloshed that she didn't realize she had the wrong house? Otherwise, why would she set her neighbor's house on fire? The logic is strange with this one. And the OP responded by saying, yes, she meant to set mine on fire. Her eyes were giant when she realized her mistake. It took a good 5 minutes after she told me the story of how she lit my house on fire. There was a little bit more information when somebody said, wow, she's nuts. Hopefully she is also facing attempted murder charges. She waited until you would have been asleep before setting the fire. Hopefully you can get a restraining order against her. And the OP added, yeah, as I said, arson and the like. I don't really speak lawyer, but she's gonna get on some anti-psych and is going into a mental ward last I heard. Someone said, hopefully the courts make her pay for all of it and she doesn't use being mentally ill as an excuse. The OP said, yeah, that's probably what she'll plead. Although it'll probably be refused because she was sloshed and that was the cause. So the big question is, did she go to the trash bins knowing that a fire created from them would jump to the house because of how close they were? Or did she think she was just gonna send them a message by having their trash cans on fire, and that was the end of it. It seems like she went in there with the intention of actually burning the house because she brought a fire starter and wood in order to keep a sustained fire going rather than just burning whatever was in the trash can. With something this serious, I'm sure she's going to have a ton of legal complications for a long time. You guys can discuss down below what you think will ultimately end up happening to her. But the big question is, what would you do if you were in this situation, and jerk or not a jerk, and why? Am I the jerk by letting a homeless man sleep in my spare room without asking my wife? So I was driving home from a gig tonight around 11 p.m. and I saw what I thought was a dead body on the side of the highway. I pulled over and walked back down the road in the dark to discover a homeless man lying on the shoulder. He was okay, just sore from a bung knee, cold and wet. I offered to give him a lift and he accepted. Chatting on the 40-mile drive back to my town, I learned that he has prostate cancer. He informed me that his older brother had lost a recent battle with the same disease and that his wife had recently died of COVID. He was hitching to a town another 2 hours away to see his estranged 17-year-old son. We discussed his homeless life and a tattoo career, as well as hearing how other people had helped him out with a bed or a train ticket. When we arrived in the small town I lived in, we drove around for a while trying to find a shelter where he could sleep. As the reality set in, I knew there was nowhere I could take him. It's cold, wet, and he doesn't own a sleeping bag. Finally, I say, forget it. You can stay at my house tonight. The only thing is, I didn't ask my wife first. She got up when she heard me talking in the basement. The spare room is down there, and I explained the story, but she is not happy. I know in my heart I'm doing a good thing, but I also know it's incredibly reckless, and I'm really worried my wife won't forgive me. So now I'm sitting upstairs trying to stay awake all night so the homeless guy in my basement doesn't sneak upstairs to murder my family. So how did this all turn out? If we jump into the future, there was an update. My wife got up and apologized to me for some reason and started putting together a care package for him. Of course, I told her that I'm the one that needs to apologize to her and that I'm a giant idiot. As many of you have also stated, she can understand that my intentions were good but reckless. I figured she'd see this post, so I told her about it. I was hoping some of the funnier comments would help lighten the mood, but the comments targeting her really stung. The takeaway from this post isn't I did a good thing and now my wife is punishing me for it. Far from it. The mess up is the damage that I've done to her trust and her feelings of personal safety and the emotional toll that it's taking on her. And let me just state, my wife is the best person in the world. She never gives me crap, even when it's deserved. She's super supportive of me and has tolerated a lot of my dumb stuff. To everyone calling her out for being heartless, bug off. I appreciate that you have my back, but that doesn't make her the villain of this story. Right now, she's upset, scared, and feeling all manners of emotions. I took a lot of your advice to heart, and I'm in the process of trying to mend everything, which so far has amounted to countless apologies and promises. So now for the update. The next morning, the spare room has 2 French doors that are pretty hard to pull open. As a result, Tim got up to use the bathroom, couldn't open the doors, assumed he was locked in, and had a little accident just as I was opening them. So there was some urine, but it wasn't malicious as some feared. I got him in the shower and his clothes in the laundry, gave him some spare clothes, made him some coffee and breakfast, an English muffin with honey for those that asked. I chatted about his family and V8 muscle cars for a while. Names and stories were consistent, though I will admit some of you made me question the validity of his previous claims, which is clearly in conflict with my carefree, trusting nature. I booked him a one-way Greyhound ticket before driving him to the local DHS office to get a new food stamp card. His last one was stolen and the balance wiped clean. I could have said stolen in quotation marks, but I'm giving Tim the benefit of the doubt because, saint and all. I packed him up with non-perishable snacks, nuts, raisins, etc., band-aids, vitamins, jackets, a blanket, and a newish backpack. It sounds generous, but it was mostly stuff that I got for free. Promoed, not pilfered from my old job and didn't need. I picked up some peanut butter espresso smoothies and headed to the bus stop. He had time to kill, plenty if you count the previous 10 hours, so I left him with $40 that I would have just spent on herb anyway, so be quiet. On a covered bench nearby and returned home to track the progress of the bus. Noticing that it was delayed, and I must admit, to make sure he was still there, I drove back to the bus stop just as the bus was pulling in behind me. He was already waiting with his gear at the stop. As I pulled up, up and said a final farewell. So to the people that praise what I did, thank you, but I'm not an entirely trusting person. I still stayed up all night anxious and doubting my decision. I still haven't slept or eaten anything solid. I still made sure to keep valuables on me or within view. I even double checked that he got on the bus.
Oh, but where is all this suspicion and caution when you made the decision to let him stay?
I hear you ask. I had those fears and suspicions. I also had a human sitting in my car at midnight with nothing warm and nowhere to sleep. So I made a pained but poorly rushed decision that hopefully won't return to bite me in the butt. As far as I can tell, nothing was stolen. So was I the jerk for letting a homeless man stay in my house without my wife's permission? This story weirdly reminds me of a story from my own life like this that didn't have such a great ending. It was a story like this that went horribly wrong. And it all started from my own naivety, believing that I was just helping someone who was grateful that I was helping them, but it got violent and it got crazy. I wasn't really ever planning on telling that story, but if you guys would maybe one day want to hear the full version of that story of what happened, because it's kind of long, let me know by leaving a comment of a thumbs up and maybe one day I'll do it. But when it comes to this story, this guy has an incredible amount of personal responsibility. He was kind of put in a hard situation. I mean, what do? You leave the guy out in the cold with this injury and no food, or you forsake the trust of your wife by not bringing somebody that she doesn't know into the house in the middle of the night that you don't know. Neither situation is really ideal, and I'm sure some people are probably going to say, well, why didn't you just wake her up to ask her? Well, how would that play out exactly? You would bring the homeless man to your house, wake your wife up in the middle of the night, and tell her, hey, I got this homeless guy. Is it cool if he stays with us? And then assuming that she says no, because she wants to sleep without worrying about that, then what are you going to do? The guy already knows where you live. Either way, it's a hard situation. People tend to want to help other people, but due to how severe the consequences are, if in the off chance it goes bad, there's a lot of hesitation. I know the guy is not looking to be praised for what a good job you did for helping this guy, but I mean, he really did. He not only had a place for him to stay, he basically packed them all up, got him food, gave him a little cash, bought him a ticket, got him a shower, washed his clothes. Stuff like that is what will help people restore their faith in humanity. But if this was you in this situation and you had a wife that, let's say, for example, you absolutely knew she would not want the homeless guy to be in the house, how would you handle it? What would you do? And do you think he is a jerk or not a jerk, and why? Am I the jerk for describing my wife as fat to our young children? My wife is 41 and I am 44 years old. We both work in education and believe in properly explaining things to our children, a 4-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. We have agreed to never use because I said so reasoning with them. My wife is unfortunately around 3 stone overweight. Her weight has crept up gradually since having the kids, and I don't think she was even aware of this until I recently raised the subject with her last year. She agreed that she needs to remedy this. Since then, we have worked together to shift the excess weight, and I'm proud to say she's lost around 10 pounds, but she still has a lot of work to do to reach her target weight. She is best at sticking to her diet if there is no temptation around, so for Easter I got her flowers instead of an egg. She seemed happy with this. Then yesterday, my children were arguing over a missing Easter egg, each accusing the other of eating it. I knew instantly what had happened. I asked my wife to tell the children where the egg, which was quite big, had really gone, and she admitted that she had eaten it. My son, whose egg it was very upset and confused and asked his mom why she had eaten it. My wife replied that she would replace it, which would be impossible as it's now after Easter. I pointed out that she had not answered the question our son had asked. He was very upset and kept asking why she had stolen his egg. I felt it was unfair that she hadn't properly answered this as he was getting more distressed. My wife completely threw me under the bus here and said,
because I wanted chocolate, but Daddy didn't get me an egg.
They already know the importance of healthy eating, so I explained that Mommy was not wanting to eat too much sugar. Several but why questions down the line, I finally said, because Mommy is fat and needs to work on this by not eating sweeties. I use the word fat because my sister is fat and always says it is not a shameful thing, and she prefers to be described this way. She says to not use the word implies there is something wrong with being fat. I probably was a jerk to presume my wife would feel the same way about this term, and I wonder if I should have said overweight instead. My wife hasn't spoken to me since and has seemed very upset. I feel terrible for upsetting her, but I think she was wrong to have taken our little boy's Easter egg without asking, and wrong to have blamed me for her actions. I regret upsetting her and possibly using the wrong terminology, but I had run out of ways to explain things to the children why I hadn't bought my wife an egg. I wouldn't have had to explain why I hadn't bought an egg if she hadn't told them this fact, or indeed, if she hadn't eaten the egg to begin with. But I do feel that I might have been a jerk for upsetting my wife. For more context, my wife said she didn't want anything for Easter. I felt uncomfortable with this, and so I got her flowers. I don't care about appearance. She has a family history of heart disease, including her older brother who died of cardiac arrest in his 40s. I worry every day about her health. She watched our 5-year-old accuse his little sister, who was crying, of stealing an egg without admitting that she had taken it. Only when I asked outright did she own up. I feel that's really unfair to both kids, which is why I asked. Fast forwarding into the future, there was an update. Clearly I messed up hugely. I said something extremely hurtful to my wife and set a really poor example to our children. I disrespected and humiliated the woman that I love. I am deeply ashamed and feel dreadful for my wife and the impact that I've had on her. I have apologized to my wife privately and also in front of the children. I also apologize to them for modeling such terrible behavior. We gave them a chance to share any feelings they had, which mainly focused on the loss of the chocolate. My daughter remarked I'd said something mean to mommy, which was sobering, and absolutely right. We couldn't find another egg. Instead, my son chose a tub of celebrations, which he has been happily sharing with his sister. Some wider issues were obviously shown by this incident. Firstly, my own issues with anxiety over my wife's health and how this manifests as me trying to exert too much influence over what she eats. I don't care about her weight for appearance sake. She will always be beautiful to me. What I care about is her high blood pressure and family history of heart disease. Her dad and her brother both died in their 40s. This has made me pathologically obsessed with losing my wife. I now see this fear has led me to be controlling and critical. I am deeply ashamed of this. I'm working with a therapist to deal with my control issues and my grief over the death of my identical twin. My wife felt it significant that the day that I called her fat was the anniversary of his death, as my fear of loss was higher than usual. I know this in no way excuses my behavior, however. My wife has requested that I continue to cook for us, prepare packed lunches, and encourage family bike rides, but beyond this, I am not to be involved. She is smart, mature, and highly capable, and I deeply regret losing sight of this. For her part, my wife apologized to our children for taking the egg and not saying anything. Contrary to what many people thought, I regularly buy her chocolate as gifts at her request. She also buys her own too. She admits she requested no egg with the best of intentions but regretted it later. She herself raised the possibility of a binge eating disorder, as she regularly will eat far beyond the point of enjoyment, leading to nausea. She is keen to pursue help for this, and she is planning to attend a specialist when she feels ready. My instinct is to encourage her to do this immediately, as I am worried, but I now realize this is controlling behavior on my part. I will always regret what happened that day and will never stop trying to make my wife aware of just how beautiful she is in every possible way, mind, body, and soul. I am now aware of how deep an effect my heartless comment may have had on her self-esteem and will never forgive myself for hurting the woman that I love. Was I the jerk? The way this guy is apologizing feels so extreme, like it's for something far beyond what they're actually talking about here. Like the guy killed her whole family or something. Yeah, he did say that, and yeah, it was mean, it did hurt her feelings, but it seems a little bit excessive, and I'm guessing this is probably because of the response to the first half of the post. People probably were tearing him apart and saying what a bad guy he was, but I think just simply saying, oh yeah, that was kind of messed up, I'm sorry about that, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, would probably be sufficient for most people, unless there's some history here that is not being explained where he just routinely says stuff like this to her. Then again, everyone takes things differently, and maybe this is just something that really impacted her in a way that was far beyond my understanding. The part of this that seems to be overlooked that nobody's really scrutinizing is the fact that the wife stole this from the kid and let the little girl take the blame for this, to the point that this little girl was crying because the brother thought that the little girl took the egg. And then when she was confronted about it, she She tried to tear down the dad in front of the kids by saying, "Oh, yeah, I did take it, but I only took it because of what your father did to me. And by the way, I wouldn't have told you unless this exact confrontation happened right in front of you guys." In the end, both of them initially handled the situation in a ham-handed way. But how do you see this? Who is in the right, who is in the wrong, and who was the jerk? A racist Karen tries to fire the Puerto Rican employees at a restaurant, but ends up getting herself deported instead. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I work at a fairly well-known restaurant in a small northern New England city. The owners were very successful owners of restaurants with several non-chain establishments and spent maybe a day or two a month in our location. The rest of the time, there was a general manager in charge. We'll call her Jan. Jan was about as type A as they come. She was a middle-aged woman, but beautiful and petite, and she always looked put together and primped. Jan had started with the owners a decade earlier in their first restaurant as a server and had worked her way up to general manager over the years. At first, I just thought she had extremely high standards, which I respected. I have standards as well and take pride in my work. I had been impressed by how the kitchens were spotless. The staff was immaculate, like run a white glove hand under the back of the oven and it comes back white, kind of clean. And the food was always top quality. I had frequently been a customer and was thrilled that I got the job there. I had been in the business for a decade and the restaurant was the place in our area. I was so excited. Unfortunately, I quickly learned why everything is so shining and perfect. Jan was a tyrant. She was the kind of boss who soured the mood of the entire staff like a storm cloud hovering over us that never went away. Nothing was ever good enough and the standards changed from day to day. On a good day, she would shut herself up in the office and then leave early. Good days were very rare and could turn into bad days at the drop of a dime. On bad days, you couldn't be perfect enough and she would just come up with new rules and new regulations to punish people. If a host called out sick, they were literal children, she would berate them on the phone and make them cry. If a cook made a mistake on a plate, she would humiliate them in front of the staff, accuse them of doing it on purpose, and then give us all the silent treatment for hours. Seriously. If someone's cash was off, even by a few cents, she would accuse them of theft and force me to cut down their hours. As a fellow manager, I was mostly spared her awful behavior, though I had to hear about her treatment from my staff almost every day. All of this was just run-of-the-mill bad boss stuff until it came time for our yearly staff evaluation meetings. This is where Raul enters the story. Raul was a hard-working dishwasher who had moved to our state from Puerto Rico a few years earlier and spoke English with some difficulty. Whenever I had to go over anything official with him, we would have a coworker translate between us to make sure we were both communicating clearly. Jan refused this courtesy to Raul. This made his evaluations pretty difficult. Raul managed to communicate to us that due to some recent cuts in his hours, he would be forced to get a second job to pay the bills. Something about this absolutely set Jan off. She told him that she would fire him if he dared. I could see plainly on the intake paperwork in front of me that Raul had been hired with the understanding that it would be a full-time position. So I pointed that out. Jan was furious, but agreed through gritted teeth that if Raul agreed not to get a second job, she would bump his hours to at least 35 hours a week. It was stated as clear as day, and I documented it in my daily manager logbook. Work went on as usual after that, and I didn't think much of this meeting again for a few months. Another time, a while later, while filing out information for my tax returns, Jan called me into the office. I could tell she had pulled the tiny room apart looking for something.
All of the information about our Puerto Rican employees is gone,
she told me with a mixture of panic and suspicion. I looked at the files in question and they all seemed to be in order, so I was confused and told her that I couldn't help. A few minutes later, I walked back in the office to find her arguing with Rosa, our most talented chef and a Puerto Rican native. Rosa was perfectly fluent in English.
Now, Rosa!
Jan was speaking to Rosa as though she were hard of hearing or mentally slow.
Where is your green card?
What are you talking about? Rosa was confused.
Are you an illegal or something? Is that why one of you broke in here to hide the proof?
Jan wasn't fully yelling, but her eyes were cold and flashing with rage.
What?
Rosa was starting to get angry now. It suddenly clicked for me, so I interrupted. Jan, you do realize that Puerto Rico is a United States territory, right?
Of course I know that.
Okay, so you know that Rosa has a social security number like any other American native.
Oh, right. Never mind, Rosa. You can go back to work.
Jan did not apologize for accusing Rosa of theft. I was so done with this place after that. Jan did all kinds of little things like that, and she never apologized. I had already gotten a job offer for a place closer to my house when the final straw came. I was the closing manager one day and got in just before the dinner rush to see Raul storming out the back door. He didn't speak much English, but his F&B was very clear. Jan had lied about raising his hours to 35 hours per week, so Raul had gotten the second job that he talked about. When Jan found out, she fired him, but not before saying something about,
all you illegals are the same.
She was really fixated on these American citizens being illegal aliens for some reason. By this point, I hated this woman. She once told me that my clothing made me look poor in front of the whole staff. I was wearing what she made me wear. Meanwhile, she wore open-toed shoes behind the line, which is against health codes, and once her fake nail fell off into the coleslaw and she wouldn't let anyone toss it out after she retrieved it. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I have a life to live. Since I knew I would be leaving soon anyway, I told Raul he should go after our boss for wrongful termination since I had documented proof with Jan's signature that he had been promised more hours and that Jan had broken the agreement, not Raul. The last time I saw Jan was on my way out of Raul's lawyer's office after giving a deposition about several labor laws she had violated, at least the ones that I knew about. Apparently, there were many others that she had broken in front of other employees. She couldn't even look me in the eye. The best part, in my deposition, I learned that Jan was actually the one who was illegally in the country. Her green card had recently expired. She was Canadian. She ended up being sent back to Canada as a result of this case, and no one has heard from her since. Raul was granted 6 months of unemployment pay, plus the restaurant had to pay his legal fees. They closed that location not long after. Maybe they should hire their managers more carefully next time. How would Jan not know if they're illegal citizens or not? Because if she's been working with this company all the way since back when she was a server, she must have some information about the hiring process, and in that process, she would know if she was hiring somebody who was an illegal citizen or not. So how could this even happen? Even if she took over for someone else, in that situation, she just would have assumed that the person that was in her position before her hired illegal workers and she just kept them on, even though every other part of her personality is about this hyper micromanagement. Every single thing has to be up to T, even to the point that you could take a white glove and rub it behind an oven and it's still a white glove. That seems like a very odd contradiction in her personality, where one side of her is incredibly by the book and the other side she's not, and then she gets mad and takes it out on these workers who she assumes are illegally working there in the first place. In this story, I feel for Raul because he needed enough hours to survive. He was promised all those hours and then he didn't get them, so he had to adapt in order to just get by, and then he was punished for that. What else could Jan have thought was going to happen? He can either survive or he can't, and if you don't let him survive, he's going to have to do something. It's not like he quit the job or he's doing something that hurt the job. He just was maybe slightly less available at her convenience. So if you were in this situation, let me know how you would have handled it down below, and jerk or not a jerk, and why. When I was 15 years old, I ran away from home because I pissed off my parents for a reason that I can't even remember. I didn't have much money, so I decided to hop onto the SkyTrain, the public transport train in British Columbia, and ride it as far as it would go. I reached the end of the line in less than an hour and decided I wanted to ride it all the way back again while trying to formulate some kind of plan of how I wanted to live the rest of my life, without my parents or anyone. At the last stop, or the first stop depending on your perspective of it, a girl came on and sat in the row right behind me. I didn't pay much attention to her at first. I was busy writing my life plan on a napkin. It was a few minutes later that she got up and sat next to me, curious as to what I was writing. I told her the story, and after a few laughs, we began talking about everything and anything. Her name was Amanda, 17 years old and absolutely wonderful. She told me she was getting off at the last stop, which was also the first stop depending on how you look at it. It was also the stop that I had gotten on originally. I told her we would ride to it together. The train ride took less than an hour, and what a wonderful hour indeed. When the last stop did come, we both knew that we probably wouldn't see each other ever again. This was in the days before cell phones, and I was a shy little kid afraid to make moves. As we got to the end of the sidewalk, which split in two different directions, she went right and I went left. Before saying goodbye, she turned to me and asked me a question that has become a wonderful part of my life. She asked me, "Tell me something you have done or you want to do that you think that I should do. It can be anything, as challenging as you want or as easy. As long as you give me the rest of my life to complete it, I promise I will do it." I was confused as to why, but I thought about it and told her, "Sing a song a cappella in a room full of strangers." She said, "Perfect," and then asked me if I would like a challenge as well. I told her I did, and she told me, "Read from start to finish Ulysses by James Joyce." I have never heard of it at the time, but I agreed, and we said our goodbyes. I have an awful memory, and I can't remember most conversations I have with people, but I remember all of that clearly. You know why? Because of the challenge that she gave me. In the 12 years that have passed since, I have tried to read that book in over 150 sittings. Every time I open my copy of the 780-page monster of a book, I always think of her, and I always think of that day. I've never been sure if it was her intent or not, but she left her lasting memory on me with that challenge. I soon after learned what she did was a completely wonderful and amazing thing for me, so I decided to keep it going. I've met a lot of strangers in my life, some that have become friends and some due to living in different time zones and whatnot that didn't. I don't want to just have experiences and then let them go. I want to remember these meetings and embrace the fact that they happened. So whenever I leave someone who has left an amazing impact in my life, I always make sure to add them to my Ulysses bucket list. I ask them to give me a challenge, as difficult or as easy as they want it to be, regardless if they have actually done it or not, simply something their heart has wanted to do. Some have been easy and fun. I met a man in India 9 years ago who told me for a week or a month, cook and buy twice as much food as I intend on eating and give the other half to a stranger in need. I completed that mission 8 years ago and thought about that man and the time we had all the way through. I met a girl on a cruise 6 years ago who told me to jump into a body of water on a slightly cold day without touching or feeling the temperature of the water first. I did that the very same year. I met a couple at an outdoor music festival a few years ago that told me to wear the most bizarre outfit imaginable and walk through a public place, completely oblivious to the fact that I wasn't looking normal. I did that task the very next day at the same festival. Some have been difficult to say the least. 3 guys I met in Amsterdam and smoked all night with told me to go to a mall and give 10 strangers 10 presents. That one took a lot of courage, but I did it a year or so after I met them. It was nerve-wracking, but at the same time it was exhilarating leaving my comfort zone. A girl I met on a plane told me to skydive. I'm still in the process of getting that done. A couple that I met in California on the beach told me to tell the 5 people I hated the most that I love them and respect them. That one was very difficult because of my stubbornness, but I've come close to completing that list many times. I'm still in the process. I have 2 more people to go. And some things have had an everlasting impact in my life. I met a girl at a music festival who told me that whenever I get mad at someone, walk away. Sing my happy song in my head for 5 minutes, go back to the person I'm mad at with a calm heart and mind, and work things out. I've made this my way of life. I once met a man in a gym in a hotel that I was staying at that told me,
Whenever your body and brain tells you that you're exhausted and done, use your heart instead and push out 2 more reps.
I've made this my motto when working out or working on any kind of extenuating exercise in which my body demands me to quit. I also use it while working on anything and while studying. One of the best pieces of advice that I've ever received. There are many others that each brought joy to my life. There are still many tasks which I have yet to accomplish, and every time I think of these tasks, I think of the people that gave them to me. It amazes me how well I remember all these people. While I can't remember so many aspects of even yesterday, these experiences, not only do I take them for a mission or a challenge, I also take them for a memory of them that never fails to appear inside of my mind. I opened my Ulysses book for probably the 300th time yesterday and read a few pages which prompted me to share this story with you today. I'm in the final 30 pages of the book, also known as the most dreaded of the read. In the last 40 pages or so, James Joyce doesn't use a single punctuation mark, no periods, no commas, no nothing. A straight up 50-page run-on sentence. I never saw Amanda after that day, nor do I know if she ever did get a chance to sing a song song to a room full of strangers. But what I do know is that she gave me a gift that has never once stopped giving. So wherever you may be, thank you for giving me the Ulysses bucket list. And I swear I'll finish it one day. My life advice, simple. Create your own Ulysses bucket list. So one of the most wild parts of this whole story is that he did actually end up finding Amanda in the future. In the update he said, I'm kind of lacking words at the moment, and I'm in awe of the power of the universe. Writing this story was just to relive a moment in my life and to share it with others and maybe help them in some sort of way, or just give an entertaining story to read. Never did I think that there was the slightest chance I would actually get to talk to her again, but that's exactly what happened. Last night, I found out that the Amanda that user, that guy who ate, knew was in fact the Amanda that I met 14 years ago. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I give to you the sincerest thank you I can possibly give. You gave me a chance to continue a life story that stopped writing 14 years ago. I will never forget this. He actually posted a snippet of what Amanda wrote to him in response to his email. The email was called, "Hi Amanda, did we meet on the SkyTrain 14 years ago?" Amanda wrote back and said, "Hi, it's me. I do remember meeting you, and it's so fascinating that although it's been 14 years and I've moved thrice, that we could actually come in contact with each other, and I'm happy to hear that you never made it through the book. That was the plan. I never got past the 35th page, and as much as I love to read, that book is impossible to get through. But anyway, since I really doubt we'll ever meet in person again, how did things turn out when you got back home?" The OP cut off the rest of the email at that point, but he said, "It's not much, but that's all I can give you. Friendship is about trust. I just met her again. I can't go around posting her emails on an open forum. Please don't email me asking for her pictures or any information of that sort. I'm sure you'll all understand. Sometimes the world and the universe seems so significant that you in comparison start feeling small. I can't yet put into words how thankful I am to you all for upvoting the visibility and helping me find that guy who ate, who in turn led me to her. It blows my mind when I really start to think about it. She lives in Georgia now, so it's unlikely that I will get to see her again. But as this story is proof, weirder things have happened. For those of you asking, she sang in front of strangers a few times, but that wasn't the challenge. The challenge was to do it a cappella. I think it's kind of beautiful in a way that she hasn't done hers and I haven't finished Ulysses. I'm still 30 pages away. I told her maybe one day we could Skype and I could read her the last part of Ulysses and she could set up her cam in a bar or a coffee shop somewhere and just start singing. I did not expect him to actually find Amanda. And I definitely didn't expect once he found her for her to say that the whole point of her telling him to read that book was so that he wouldn't do it. This guy has basically built his entire life philosophy around this concept and kind of lives by this deep philosophy, and it's changed the way he's experienced life, all from the way that he interpreted that interaction with her. But then after all those years, he finally gets to talk to her and she just says, "I'm happy you never made it through the book. That was the plan. I never got past the 35th page." The entire first part of this story sounded like the beginning of a movie. He gets on the train, he has this really moving experience with this girl, and then he's forced to part ways in this kind of heart-wrenching end to their conversation that is only threaded through with this really interesting challenge. And I think this challenge is interesting. I might actually try this in the future with anyone that I meet and see if anyone will actually do this. I just got to think of some good challenges, ones that I would actually want to do myself, which is what this whole thing is based on, at least how he interpreted it. But what would that be for you? Let me know down below. And also, what would you do if you're the OP in this situation? Would you continue keeping up a relationship with Amanda through email or try and meet up? Let me know down below.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.